So I'm Chris Speaks. I'm here tonight with Bill Brown, who is an expert on the murder of Officer Jd Tippett, who was killed on the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963, after President Kennedy. Bill, do you think Lee Harvey Oswald killed Officer Tippett alone?
I do. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, it's a fact that Lee Oswald alone killed Jd Tippett.
So the shots ring out at 12:30. Oswald leaves the Texas School Book Depository. What happens next?
Well, what he did, he goes out the front entrance of the Depository building. He's out there within 2.5 minutes, and he walks up Elm Street a number of blocks, and he gets on a bus that's driven by Cecil McWaters. And McWaters testified that Oswald got on the bus mid-block. It wasn't at a bus stop. The bus was actually stopped in traffic because of the assassination. And Oswald gets on the bus mid-block. He's on the bus for a few minutes. The bus is barely moving, and he decides to get off the bus. Gets a transport for another bus. So he gets off the bus, walks a few blocks to the Greyhound station, and gets in a cab driven by William Whaley. Now, he gives Whaley a destination of 500 North Beckley, and Oswald's rooming house, for those who may not know, is 1026 North Beckley. So for some reason, Oswald gives Whaley an address about 5 blocks south of the rooming house. So they go past the rooming house, and they're around the 700 block. So he's not quite all the way to the destination, and he tells Whaley, "Hey, this will do fine right here." So Whaley pulls over, and Oswald pays him and gets out. Oswald walks 3 blocks back up to the rooming house. He goes inside. Earlene Roberts was the housekeeper, and she's in there. She's fidgeting with the TV, trying to get news about the assassination attempt. And because all she knew at that time was, someone had shot at the president. But anyway, so Oswald comes in, and he goes back to his room. Earlene Roberts testified that he was back there just long enough to grab a jacket. Now, she gives different time variants, that he was back there like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. But she qualifies it all by basically saying he was back there long enough to grab a jacket. So she says he goes out the front door. She said, "You sure are in a hurry," and he didn't even respond to her.
What time would this be?
Well, Earlene Roberts said it was about 1 o'clock. She said it was about 1. Now that, it could be 12:57, it could be 1:03, or any time in between. But she said it was about 1 o'clock, and there's really no way for us to know the exact minute that Oswald left the rooming house. But and of course, she testifies at the Warren Commission later that she sees him standing out at the bus stop. Once he left the rooming house, she looked out the window moments later and saw him standing at a bus stop, which was pretty much right outside the rooming house, and that was the last time she saw him.
So 1:02, 1:03.
Yeah. I mean, he could have came in at 12:58 and was back in his room for 2 minutes because, again, she said he was just back there long enough to grab a jacket.
Pre-digital.
What's that?
This is pre-digital watches and clock.
Oh yeah, absolutely, sure. Yeah, everybody used wind-up watches, and I remember having one of those when I was a kid.
Yeah, I did too.
If you didn't wind it up, the one I had, of course, I was a little kid and it was a cheap watch, but if you didn't wind it up twice a day, it was falling behind. Put it that way.
Okay, so she sees him at the bus stop. What happens next?
Well, Oswald is next seen basically on 10th Street. Now, to orient ourselves, the shooting of Jd Tippett, and let me say this first of all, a lot of people know that John Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, on November 22nd, 1963. But unless you're a student of the case or a researcher, you don't know that Officer Jd Tippett, he was a police officer for the city of Dallas, also was shot and killed that day. So a lot of people aren't aware of that. So what we have here is that shooting took place about 150 feet east of the corner of 10th and Patton on 10th Street. So moments before the shooting, Oswald is seen by Jimmy Burt. Now, Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith were standing out in the front yard. They were at the corner of 10th and Denver, which was 1 block east of 10th and Patton. And Jimmy Burt said that he saw the fellow who would eventually shoot the police officer walking across the street from the front yard they were in, walking from east to west. In other words, walking across the intersection of 10th and Denver. So he crossed Denver Street and continued walking west towards Patton. So they both noticed, Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith both noticed the police car pull up and stop. You know, from their perspective, it was about 2/3 of the block down on your way down to 10th and Patton. And they said that Jimmy Burt said that the officer pulled up, and the man walking, who again Jimmy Burt had seen this fellow walking moments earlier, one block east of 10th and Patton, and again the man was walking west towards Patton on 10th Street. So Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, they're watching the officer and the fellow talk, which probably only took, the conversation was very short, probably 10, 15 seconds, something like that. And about the same time, Domingo Benavides, he was attending to a broken down vehicle on Patton Street between 10th and Jefferson. And he had left that scene to go to the auto parts store to get a part for that car to fix that vehicle. And as soon as he was no more than a quarter mile away, he realized that he had forgotten the part number. So he had to go back. So he circled the block, and he was coming up Denver, and he turned left onto 10th Street, which is heading west on 10th. So he's driving towards the patrol car that has already pulled over, and he notices the conversation between the two men, between Officer Tippit and the man who was walking. And at the same time, you have Helen Markham. Now, she was walking to catch her bus. She was a waitress at a restaurant called the Eat Well, and that was on Main Street in Dallas. And she was on the way to catch her bus, which was at the corner of Jefferson and Patton, which ends up being one block south of the shooting scene, between where Tippett was killed. So she's walking, and she lived on 9th Street. So she has a 2-block walk from her apartment to her bus stop, 2 blocks down Patton. Okay. And so she reaches the intersection of 10th and Patton, and she's standing on the northwest corner, which is catty corner from the patrol car, the closest corner to where Tippett's patrol car had stopped. And she notices the patrol car stop a man who was walking. So you have these people. You have Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, who are a block east of the scene. You have Domingo Benavides driving in his pickup truck, and he's driving right towards the patrol car. And you have Helen Markham, and she's standing at the corner of 10th and Patton, and she's about 150 west of the patrol car. And all 4 of these people notice the police officer stop to talk to a man who was walking on the street. Okay. So basically between the rooming house and that's the next time Oswald is seen, is when he's walking west on 10th Street by Jimmy Burt.
What time was Markham supposed to get on the bus?
Well, the FBI actually did they looked into the matter, and they determined that there was a bus stop at Patton and Jefferson at 1:12 p.m. and 1:22 p.m. and every 10 minutes thereafter. So 1:32 p.m., 1:42 p.m., etc. So Markham was asked by Ball during her Warren Commission testimony. He says, "What time do you get your bus?" Now, that's a strange way to phrase a question, but nevertheless, that's how he asked the question. What time do you get your bus? And so we don't know really whether Markham, the time she gave was not 1:12 or 1:22. Okay, so we don't know if Markham was on her way to catch the bus at 1:12 or if she's on her way to catch a bus at 1:22. And now a lot of conspiracy theorists who want to try to push up the time of the shooting of Tippett, they're going to insist that Markham was on her way to catch the bus at 1:12, but they don't have a right to do that. And I'm not sitting here telling you for a fact that it was 1:22, the bus she was trying to catch. Who knows? But when Ball asked her what time she gets her bus, she didn't say 1:12 or 1:22. So we don't know.
What time did she say that this took place?
Well, she said that she left her apartment about 1:06, 1:07.
Okay.
And which puts her, if it takes 2 minutes to walk south a block, then let's put it this way. She says she was at the corner of 10th and Patton about 1:07 or so, which has the shooting occurring much earlier than the Warren Commission's version, which the Warren Commission has the shooting occurring around 1:14, 1:15.
Okay, does either one of those time frames give Oswald enough time to get there?
Well, I can tell you, as a lot of people have done, I was there in March of 2020 with a handful of other people from our Facebook group, JFK Truth Be Told. And we walked from the bus stop on Beckley, just outside the rooming house, to the intersection of 10th and Patton, and it took us about 12 and a half minutes. So if Oswald would have left at, say, 101, 102, he gets there to the intersection of 10th and Patton around 113, 114, something like that.
Okay. All right.
So I guess it depends on how much you want to, how much weight one wants to give to Helen Markham's time estimate of when it was that she left her apartment and what time she estimated to be standing at the corner of 10th and Patton.
Yeah. So we're just talking about just fractions of
Sure.
It became 12.
Sure.
Yeah. So we're maybe a minute or so. Yeah. Okay.
But
So
the most important thing about Helen Markham.
I'm sorry.
That's right. I was just going to say the most important thing about Helen Markham is she attended a lineup that evening, Friday evening, and she picked the number 2 man, which was Oswald, a lineup of 4 fellows. And she picked the number 2 man, which was Oswald, as the man she saw shoot the policeman. And during her Warren Commission testimony, there was obviously some confusion with her and Ball. But once they got the confusion settled, she states as a fact, number 2 was the man I saw shoot the policeman. That's what she testifies to. And she testified that she did pick a number 2 man at the lineup.
Did Ball not ask her, though? Was there a number 2?
Say that again?
During the Warren Commission testimony,
Yes.
Did Ball not originally ask her, and she said, "I didn't know nobody that day"?
Yeah, and I think that she was. I think she was confused on what Ball was trying to ask her. I think Ball was trying. Ball was trying to ask her if she recognized any of the men in the lineup from being at 10th and Patton. I think she was confused and thought Ball was asking her if she knew anybody in the lineup before November 22nd. Do you see what I'm saying? I think she was confused. I don't know. Obviously, Ball wasn't asking her that, but I think that's what she thought, and that's where the confusion was. I didn't know
anybody that day. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, I mean that's just my opinion. That's my opinion on how that went down. You have to, when you read Warren Commission testimony, you're reading text. You have to be able to decipher just exactly the verbiage that went down in person in that room where she's testifying. Sometimes you're not going to get context, or you're not going to get pauses and emphasis and things like that in their voice. The bottom line is she did pick. Forget her Warren Commission testimony. Let's pretend like she never even testified. It doesn't change the fact that on November 22nd, 1963, that evening, she picked the number 2 man in the lineup, and that was Oswald. And that positive identification in the lineup has nothing to do with any confusion that she might have had 4.5 months later when she was testifying.
Did she see him prior to that lineup being on TV?
No, she did not.
Okay.
And she was asked that question. She did not see him on television. Now, some of the other witnesses had. By the time the FBI showed up and showed them photographs, or a photograph of Oswald, and to see if this was the man that they had seen at 10th and Patton running with a gun in his hand, and they had already seen Oswald on television, but Helen Markham had not.
Okay, so let's go back. You said those 4 men, or those 4 people are there at those spots. And
yeah. You have Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith. They're basically a block east, and they're both watching the police car pulled along the sidewalk, talking to a fellow who was walking on the street. You have Benavides in his pickup truck approaching the patrol car. He notices a conversation going on between the two. And you have Helen Markham. She's basically a block west of Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, and she's standing there on the corner, and she's watching the policeman talk to the fellow who was walking. All right. So all of a sudden, the shots ring out, a number of shots, and Benavides was about 15, 20 feet away from the patrol car when he heard the shots. He swerves over to the right, up onto the curb, basically, and ducks down. And Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, now they basically are shouting to each other, "Hey, that man just shot the police officer." Helen Markham starts to scream. She's afraid. She's the only one that really watched the entire thing unfold from beginning to end, that is. And she starts to scream, "He killed that man! He killed that man!" So the killer, after firing the shots from across the hood, according to Benavides, who testified to the Warren Commission, that the killer then backed up onto the sidewalk, because the killer was standing on the curb talking to Jd Tippett. Well, the killer, after firing the shots across the hood, he backed up to the sidewalk, proceeded to unload the revolver of the spent shells, and he starts to head west towards the corner of 10th and Patton. Now, granted, keep in mind they were about 150 feet east of the intersection. So he starts. So the killer starts running towards the corner, and he's unloading his weapon. So you have Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis, they were inside the house that was located at the corner of 10th and Patton, and they hear the shots. They're lying in bed. They hear the gunshots. They both get up and go to the front door. And Barbara Davis is the first one to the door. Virginia Davis is behind her. And these two girls are sister-in-law. But Barbara Davis gets to the door, and the first thing she notices, she doesn't notice the gunman cutting across her yard yet. The first thing she notices is Helen Markham across the street, catty corner from her front yard, yelling, "He shot that man, he shot that man." And she was screaming, and Davis could tell that this woman was terrified at that moment. So then Barbara Davis readjusts her focus, and that's when she notices a man who she identified as Lee Oswald cutting catty corner across her front yard with the revolver open, either removing shells or reloading it. I think she said he was actually still removing shells, but he was fumbling with the revolver. And Barbara Davis saw this as well. Now, Oswald, the gunman, I'm just going to say Oswald, he gets to the corner, he jumps the shrubs, and William Scoggins, now, he's sitting in a cab on Patton facing north at the intersection of 10th and Patton. And he saw the patrol car, Tippett's patrol car, pass slowly in front of him. And he looked to his right while he was sitting in his cab eating his lunch, and he saw the patrol car pull over basically 2 houses down, 2 houses to the east of the intersection where he was sitting. And he saw the officer pull alongside a man who was walking. And Scoggins said the man was actually walking east, which would have been back towards Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith. Okay, so if Jimmy Burt is to be trusted, that the man was walking west on 10th Street, then William Scoggins sees the man walking east on 10th Street. So this man would have at some point turned around and changed direction. And in my opinion, he did that when he saw the approaching patrol car. Does that make sense?
So he was walking towards Officer Tippit, sees the patrol car, turns around and starts walking back.
Well, that's the only thing I'm left to conclude because that's the only thing I'm left to conclude because Jimmy Burt sees the guy walking west. William Scoggins, when he first notices the guy, he's walking east. So the guy is literally walking the opposite direction that he was walking from one moment to the next.
That would definitely give the officer
cause to pull up and basically try to, hey, what was that all about? And again, that's pure speculation. Here's the thing, though. William Scoggins, who was sitting in his cab, and again, he's facing north, so he's looking right at the intersection of 10th and Patton. And he saw the patrol car cruise slowly through the intersection, driving from west to east on 10th Street. He did not see the eventual killer, who again he identified as Oswald, walk in front of his cab or coming down Patton, coming south on Patton. If the killer would have been coming south on Patton or walking from west to east across 10th Street, Scoggins would have seen him most likely. I don't know how he could have missed him. Scoggins was sitting in his cab looking right out his windshield as he was eating his lunch. But he did notice the patrol car. So when you take Scoggins' account along with Jimmy Burt's account, you basically have the gunman walking west on 10th Street. And then it gets about 2/3 of the way to the next block, which would have been Patton, notices the approaching patrol car, and for some reason switches directions, which ended up being a fatal blunder on his part. So the patrol car driven by Tippit pulls up, starts talking to him. So anyway, I explained you had the shots ringing out. Now you got the gunman cutting across Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis' front yard, unloading the revolver. He cuts the corner. Now William Scoggins, who was watching, he testified that he noticed the police officer open the door, the driver's side door, and get out. And he says, so I continued eating my lunch and I heard the shot. He goes, and I feel like I remember seeing the officer fall, but he wasn't 100% sure. It was a little hazy to him. So he's looking to see what's going on. Next thing he notices is the gunman is running straight into his direction. Again, now he's sitting right beside the front yard of Barbara Davis. Okay. So Barbara Davis sees Oswald cutting across the yard. William Scoggins sees the guy running right in his direction with a gun. Scoggins gets out of the cab because he said that he was always trained to, in a situation like that, to leave the cab so that the gunman doesn't try to hijack the cab with him being a part of it. So he gets out and starts to run across Patton, the opposite direction from where the gunman was coming. Realized he had nowhere to go, and it made more sense. He returns back to the cab, and on the driver's side back quarter panel, he's ducking down, and he's looking over the quarter panel, the back trunk of the car. And this is when he sees the gunman cut across the yard and jump over the shrubbery and proceed to head south on Patton. Now, Scoggins, this is when a lot of people have heard about the comment where Scoggins heard the gunman say, "Poor damn cop," or "Poor dumb cop." He said he wasn't sure whether he said damn or dumb, but he either said "poor damn cop" or "poor dumb cop," and he said it twice. And I want to pause right here for a second, because when Oswald first got home from the Marine Corps, he was he went to Russia. I should rephrase that and say when he got back from Russia, okay, he and Robert were in the car one day, and Robert was driving. Now, this is Robert Oswald, Lee's brother.
Huh?
And Robert Oswald was getting ready to blow through an intersection. The light was turning red, and he was going to try to stop, but there was a car behind him that was right on his butt, and he said that if he would have stopped, the car would have hit him. So he went ahead and went through the intersection and basically ran a red light. Well, they got pulled over by a police officer who saw this. So the police officer comes up. Robert Oswald pleads his case. Hey, if I would have stopped, that guy would have hit me. So that's why I went through the intersection and ran the red light. Well, this didn't matter to the police officer. He gave Robert Oswald a ticket he gave him a citation for running the red light. So as they're pulling away, according to Robert Oswald, Lee looks back over his shoulder at the officer as they're driving away and mutters to himself, "Dumb cop." So this doesn't mean Oswald's a cop killer, but I do think this is an interesting note worth mentioning that at one point a year earlier, Oswald said "dumb cop" to himself as he and Robert Oswald were driving away from the scene. So anyway, you have William Scoggins ducking behind his cab, hiding basically from the gunman who was coming his direction. The gunman turns the corner. Scoggins hears the fellow say, "Poor damn cop" or "poor dumb cop." He says it twice. So
Doesn't it almost sound sympathetic though?
yeah, it does. Yeah, I don't think Oswald wanted to be a cop killer that day. I think he wanted to be a political assassin, but I don't think he wanted to be a cop killer. But he didn't want to be taken into custody, so Tippett was in the wrong place at the wrong time as far as that goes.
Okay.
So Oswald's running south on Patton, and Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, now keep in mind, they are a block east of 10th and Patton, and they're about 2/3 of a block east of the parked patrol car that was driven by Tippett. They begin to leave the front yard and make their way west towards the patrol car. They see the officer laying in the street. Benavides is ducking down behind his truck. He popped up a couple of times. He saw the killer running away from the scene. He even said that the killer looked back at him for a minute as he was, getting closer to the corner, probably just to check to make sure that the guy in the pickup truck, which is Benavides, wasn't going to jump out of the pickup truck and run after him, perhaps. I don't know. But Benavides is cowering, inside the pickup truck. Jimmy Burt, Bill Smith are beginning to leave the front yard to head towards the patrol car. Helen Markham is still at the corner, the northwest corner of 10th and Patton, screaming. Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis are both on the porch. Oswald has now turned the corner. William Scoggins is hiding behind his cab. Oswald starts to head south on Patton, and the first thing he notices, it's really not even known if he even noticed William Scoggins, the cab driver. He may not even know. Scoggins never said he looked at him. But Oswald surely did notice two fellows down Patton. About halfway down Patton, Sam Ginyard was working at Deutsch Brothers or Deutsch Motor Company, later Harris Brothers Motor Company. And he was a porter on the lot. I believe he was washing a car or something like that. So he heard the shots, looks up the street, and he goes out to the sidewalk. And also Ted Callaway was the sales manager. He hears the shots. He was standing on the front porch of his office, located right in the middle of the lot. So he hears the shots. He goes out to the sidewalk as well. And these two fellows look up the street and they see a gunman coming down the street. Oswald's just turned the corner. He's just cut across the yard of the Davis house. He's just went past the cab driven by, he just passed Scoggins' cab. And first thing he's going to see now are these two fellows, Sam Ginyard and Ted Callaway, on the same side of the street as he is. So he crosses the street. and begins to go south on Patton on the other side of the street from Ginyard and Callaway. And this is also could be one of the reasons why Ginyard said he was closer to the gunman than Callaway, because Ginyard said he was something like 10 or 15 feet away from the gunman, but Callaway said it was like 56 feet. Well, Callaway and Ginyard were standing in two different spots. Ginyard was further north up the block than Callaway was. Callaway was closer to Jefferson. So when Oswald cut that corner, he probably got much closer to Ginyard before he cut across the street, not running to run right past Ginyard. You know what I mean? If you're the gunman and you're trying to flee the scene, you don't want to run right past somebody standing on the sidewalk. You're going to cut to the other side of the street. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total.
Yeah. So he was closer to Ginyard than he was to Callaway. So Oswald gets about 2/3 of the way down the block, and he's still fumbling with the revolver. He's still trying to get it either unloaded or he's loading it. And this is when Ted Callaway yells out to the gunman who he identified as being Lee Oswald. And Callaway yells out to him, "Hey, man, what the hell is going on?" And Callaway said that he didn't realize that the guy had just killed a police officer here, or else he never would have yelled that to him. He actually said that later, but he goes, that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know what the hell was going on. So that's what I said. That's what I asked him. And Callaway said that the gunman who he identified as Oswald muttered something to himself and then just kept on going. Callaway was standing there about 2/3 of the way down between Patton and Jefferson, and notices basically the gunman get to the corner. Now, at this point, as Oswald is passing Ginyard and Callaway heading south on Patton, 1 block south of the shooting scene, 1 block south of 10th and Patton, was Patton and Jefferson. Jefferson Boulevard was a main thoroughfare. Now, there's across the street from the car lot where Ted Callaway worked, there was another car dealership called the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company. Now, in this office building, just a little 2-story building, were 4 fellows: Warren Reynolds, Harold Russell, Pat Patterson, and L.J. Lewis. These 4 fellows were standing in the second floor office. They all go out to the balcony on the second floor, and they look up the street, and they see the gunman because they heard the shots. They hear these shots ring out, and they're looking up the street trying to figure out what's going on, and they see the gunman running down Patton. All 4 of them said he was messing with the gun as he was coming down the street, most likely trying to get it reloaded. And the gunman, when he gets to the corner of Patton and Jefferson, now he's by this point he's 1 block south of the shooting scene. He puts the revolver. It's like he's finally got it loaded. He puts the revolver in his waistband, straightens himself up, and begins to walk as he turns from south on Patton to heading west on Jefferson. In other words, new street. He wants to have a new demeanor. So,
Makes sense.
but yeah, exactly. So Oswald now is heading west on Jefferson, and Warren Reynolds and Pat Patterson, they decide they're going to follow the gunman. L.J. Lewis goes inside to call the police, and Harold Russell, the 4th guy that was at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, well, he goes up Patton to see what happened up there. In fact, Harold Russell was on the scene when the police arrived, a little bit later. So Warren Reynolds and Pat Patterson are following him from the other side of the street. They lose sight of him. Between the corner of Patton and Jefferson, the next street over going west is Crawford and Jefferson. Okay. There's a service station right there called the Blues Texaco station. Oswald at some point cut behind the Blues Texaco station, and this is where Warren Reynolds and Pat Patterson, they lose sight of him. So next thing and Oswald's not seen again until he's seen by Johnny Brewer on Jefferson Boulevard, standing in the recessed area, pretending to look at shoes. This was about maybe half a block to 2/3 of a block before Oswald got to the Texas Theater. So at this point, though, as Oswald is cutting behind the Blues Texaco station, you have Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith. They've now got to the patrol car, and they're looking down at the officer's body. You have Benavides. He got out. Once the killer turned the corner of the house of the Davis yard, the yard of the Davis house, Benavides gets out and goes over to the patrol car to attempt to use the mic to call the dispatcher, the police dispatcher, to report the shooting. Okay. And Markham's across the street when the shooting occurs. She's made her way over to the patrol car. And Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis, Barbara Davis went back inside to call the police, and then both of those girls they come out. Everybody's waiting a safe amount of time until the killer was gone before they go over to the patrol car. So Oswald's making his way behind the Texaco station, and Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, they're at the patrol car. They're looking down at Tippett's body, and they decide they're going to go off after the killer. They saw him turn south on Patton, then they lost sight of him. So they go over to Patton and start to head south. Well, halfway down, when you're on Patton, coming from 10th going down to Jefferson, that one block, halfway down there's an alley that runs parallel between 10th Street and Jefferson Boulevard. And they get down to the halfway point there, and they look west through the alley, and they see the man who shot the policeman, and he's in the alley. And it's almost like they lost their courage upon seeing him because they knew he had a gun, and so that's as far as they went. They actually went back to the scene. But these two fellows, Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, in a nutshell, they make their way from the shooting scene to the corner of 10th and Patton. They proceed south on Patton. And as they're going south on Patton, at the halfway point is the alley. They look through the alley. They notice the gunman. He was one block west in that alley. They said he was almost down to the next street, which puts him right behind that Texaco station that I was talking about. Okay, so that's important because that ends up being where the jacket was found. That all of the witnesses to the Tippett murder said the killer was wearing a jacket, and then Oswald is arrested with no jacket. Okay, and the jacket is found in the parking lot behind the Texaco station. And we know, according to Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, that the fellow who killed the officer was in that alley behind the Texaco station, at least for a few moments. They said he was almost down to the next street.
Hey, let me interrupt you for 1 second.
Yes, sir.
You said that Domingo Benavides tried to use the radio. I've heard the call logs. I think, was it 117? Yes. What was it, him or somebody else that actually went
Okay,
over?
so yeah, getting back to that then, I'm glad you asked that. So Benavides is trying to key the mic. He didn't know how to work it. He's trying to report the shooting to the police dispatcher, but he didn't know how to work it. And about this time, T.F. Boley, B-O-W-L-E-Y, I don't know if it's Bally or Boley, but he pulls up on the scene, notices he's coming from basically from east heading west, pretty much same direction that Benavides was driving earlier. He gets out, he looks down at the officer, notices right away the officer's dead. There's nothing he can do for him. So he goes over to the police mic, and he notices Benavides still fumbling with it. Benavides was messing with that mic for about 1.5 to 2 minutes trying to get it to work. Boley gets on it, and when you hear the police tapes and you hear the famous, hello, police operator, want to report a shooting out here on 10th Street. It's a police officer. Somebody shot him. That's T.F. Boley. That's who you're hearing. It's not Benavides. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've heard those right there. I couldn't remember who it was.
Yeah, that was T.F. Boley, and he's the one
that was at 117, right?
What's that?
That was around 117 when
the police. Yeah, the police tapes have that, and researcher Dale Myers. The police tapes have it at 116. Researcher Dale Myers places it at 117.
I know that Boley, and again, talking about the watches and stuff, I think Boley said it was 110 or something when he pulled up.
Yeah. So Boley pulls up, and he says that when he pulled up to the scene, he looked down at his watch as he was getting out and noticed his watch said 110. So if he's right that it was 110, then you had the shooting occurring, before 110, obviously. But the question is, was he right? Was his watch 100% correct, or was his watch running a little slow? And again, we're talking about 1963 era wind-up wristwatches. So there's no guarantee we have that Boley's watch, was correct.
Yeah, and I don't see him letting him lay in the street 7 minutes before making a call to the police.
Yeah, see, here's the thing with that. So Mary Wright, she heard the shots, and she was living in a house that shared basically Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, the house they were in was a duplex, and Frank and Mary Wright lived in the other unit. So when they heard the shots, they went outside, and Frank Wright went outside. Mary Wright said first thing she did was call the police. Okay. And then Barbara Davis also called the police. Okay, so let me just say it this way. Mary Wright heard the shots, called the police immediately, and that's her words, immediately, according to George and Patricia Nash. They interviewed her in 1964. Barbara Davis heard the shots, and she saw the man walking across her yard, unloading a gun, and she heard Markham screaming. So she immediately went, according to her, again, immediately went inside, and she called the operator to report the shooting. L.J. Lewis, now he was one of the four guys in the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company. Well, he heard the shots and he saw the gunman coming south on Patton. He goes inside and calls the police. Okay, so Murray Jackson was the dispatcher, and he received the alert from the citizen using the police radio, which ends up being T.F. Boley. And that comes through again, according to the police tapes, at 1:16, could have been 1:17, but he was told that a policeman had been shot. And he asked, what's the location? And the person on the police mic says, Marsalis, between Beckley, near Marsalis, Beckley, and 10th. So Jackson, knowing that earlier he had sent Tippett, Jd Tippett, to that area, immediately calls out for car number 78. And that was Tippett's call sign. That car 78 was not really car 78, but 78 was Tippett. And it was basically his call number.
So he was pulled off his regular beat to go there?
Yeah, because they basically were draining officers from the surrounding area up to Dilly Plaza. So they were pulling officers from further out to go up to the surrounding area, which is why Tippett was pulled from further south, which was 78, up to the Jefferson Boulevard area, which is where he was eventually killed, he was out of his patrol area, but he was sent there by Murray Jackson, the dispatcher. Point being, though, when Jackson gets the call on the police tape from T.F. Boley, Jackson asks, where is this shooting? And Boley says basically gives him three streets, Marsalis, Beckley, and 10th. So Jackson immediately calls out for 78. Okay. Jackson is then informed that it's car number 10, and he calls out for 78 two more times. If you listen to the police tapes, you hear him call out for 78 three times, I believe it is. So since we know that Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, and O.J. Lewis called the police almost immediately, and we know that Murray Jackson was unaware of the shooting until he received the alert from the citizen using the police radio at 1:16 and 1:17, it's obvious that Wright, Davis, and Lewis phoned in the shooting at a point in time just before the citizen using the police radio had alerted Jackson. Okay, because if these three witnesses had phoned in the shooting much earlier, then Jackson would have already been made aware of the shooting by the time the citizen using the police radio reported it to him, which was T.F. Boley. Does that make sense?
Total.
Okay, so the simple fact that when Murray Jackson, the dispatcher, got notified that it was car number 10, he calls out for 78. He's unaware that there's been a shooting of a police officer, because otherwise he wouldn't have called out for 78. So the fact that he was unaware means that he hadn't got word yet from Wright, Barbara Davis, and O.J. Lewis. So what happens is, let me explain this to you real quickly. So Mary Wright, when a person calls in to the operator back in 1963, there was no 911. You just hit 0. Mm-hmm. So you call the operator, you tell the operator, I want to talk to the police. The operator sends you to the police department, and there was people that would answer the phone at the police department. Well, then basically you would have Mary Wright or Barbara Davis or O.J. Lewis say, hey, we heard gunshots. There's an officer. L.J. Lewis wouldn't know this yet, but basically we heard gunshots. There's an officer laying in the street. We saw a man running with a gun. The officer looks dead, whatever it was they may have said. What's going to happen is this police operator is going to they're going to make a note. They're going to get the location of the caller, the location of the shooting. They're going to put it like on a little conveyor belt, if you will, that goes down to the dispatcher, which in this case is Murray Jackson. So what happens is Murray Jackson gets this piece of paper, he opens it up, and he will then alert other units on the police radio, hey, we have an incident at blah, blah, blah. My point is, Murray Jackson had not received that note yet by the time he got the notice from the person using the police radio, which was T.F. Boley. But what I'm saying is Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, and O.J. Lewis, all three of them called the police immediately.
Understand? Yeah.
So Boley, by the time Boley gets on the police tape to report it, Jackson hasn't had time yet to receive note of the phone calls from those three citizens I just mentioned. So if you follow what I'm saying, Boley could not have, it couldn't have been 1:10, because what happens to the 6 or 7 minutes if all three of these citizens called the police right away?
Yeah, you're almost giving it a time right there of the shooting just by the time that Wright calls in and he calls out for the car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what happens is at 1:16, and again, Dale Myers has it. I say 1:16 because that's the official police tape Warren Commission time, and Dale Myers actually did a more detailed account and came up with 1:17:41, I believe it is. So almost 1:18 even when Bally makes the phone call, or I'm not sorry, not the phone call, but the report on the police microphone. And so if Boley makes this report immediately upon arriving at the scene, and Murray Jackson hasn't received notification yet from Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, or LJ Lewis, then Boley is making the report over the police mic. Common sense tells you no more than a minute or two after the shooting had occurred.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Murray Jackson would have already received notification from these three citizens who were calling the police to report the shooting. Do you follow me?
Oh, absolutely. So that puts it at like 1:15, 1:16.
Yeah, the Warren Commission determined it was 1:14, the actual shooting. Yeah. So my point with all that is one of two things here. If Bally's watch, either Bally's watch was 100% correct, he pulled up at 1:10, which means the shooting occurred at 1:08 or 1:09. But if that's the case, that means Tippett's body laid in the street for 7 or 8 minutes, 9 minutes even, before Mary Wright, Barbara Davis, and OJ Lewis decided to call the police. And the police, the people receiving the phone call from these citizens, then notifies Murray Jackson. So this whole process from the time that they called the police to Murray Jackson getting the little notation would be 7, 8, 9 minutes, and it doesn't take that long. This stuff's pretty instant.
Yeah, I totally follow there. I mean, okay, so now back. Well,
there's one more thing too. So Benavides, he's there was a documentary called The Warren Report that came out in 1967, put out by CBS. And in part 3 of that, Eddie Barker interviews Benavides at the shooting scene at 10th and Patton. And Benavides says that he sat there for a second or two, and that's a direct quote, sat there for a second or two. And basically Benavides says, I gave him enough time to get around the corner, make sure he wasn't going to be coming back. And then I got out and I went over to start try to report the shooting on the police radio. Well, Benavides first starts to key the mic at like 1:15. If you listen to the actual police tapes, you can hear the mic being keyed, even though he never did get through because he didn't know how to do it right. It begins at 1:15, lasts for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. All throughout the traffic on the police tapes, you can hear Benavides keying the mic over and over again for 1.5 to 2 minutes. Then you hear Bally make the famous report that he makes when he's reporting the shooting to Murray Jackson.
Okay.
And Benavides begins keying the mic at 1:15. Point being that Benavides, if he starts keying the mic at 1:15, the shooting didn't occur at 1:08, or else you have Benavides in his truck for 7 minutes after the shooting before he gets out and goes over and starts to key the mic.
Yeah,
that's not logical.
Yeah.
But if the shooting occurred at 1:14, then you have Benavides in his truck for 30 to 45 seconds before he gets out and goes over and starts to key the mic. Now, which makes more sense to you?
Oh, yeah, that one right there. Yeah.
Exactly. He obviously waited 30 seconds to a minute instead of 7 or 8 minutes before getting out of his truck. 7 or 8 minutes before getting out of his truck means he's still hiding in his truck while Frank Cimino and Helen Markham and Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis and all these other people begin to mill around the car, and you got Benavides still ducking down in his truck. That's not logical.
No, not at all. I mean, I don't know if you've ever different jobs where they've had us close your eyes, and when you think you get to 2 minutes, raise your hand, and we've got people, get to 20 seconds and raise their hands.
Oh, so, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and sitting there, that would feel like an eternity.
Oh, absolutely. It's a figure of speech. He said he sat there for a second or two. He didn't sit there for 1 or 2 seconds. He probably sat there for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, maybe even a minute. He actually testified to the Warren Commission that he sat there for 2 or 3 minutes. But again, that's a figure of speech, not meant to be taken literal.
Right.
Now, another thing about the timing dispute here. So Ted Callaway, he hears 5 shots and he runs out to the sidewalk on Patton, and he saw Oswald crossing Patton as Oswald was making his way south. And that's when Callaway hollers out to him, "Hey man, what the hell's going on?" Callaway then runs, in his words, a good hard run up to the corner of 10th and Patton. He noticed the patrol car. He goes over to it, He sees Tippett laying in the street. He sees Tippett lying dead in the street, I should say. And then he helped load. He was helps load the body into the ambulance. So let's recap this. Let's slow this down for a second. So Ted Callaway hears the shots, runs to the sidewalk, watches the gunman run south on Patton the entire block, runs 2/3 of a block up to the shooting scene, and reports the shooting to the dispatcher. So Callaway gets on the police microphone to report the shooting, not unaware that TF Boley had already done it. Callaway didn't know if anybody reported it or not yet, so he went ahead and reported it. That's when he was told, if you listen to the police tapes, you hear, "Citizen, please remain off the radio now." Well, that was Murray Jackson telling Ted Callaway, "Hey, stay off the air now. We got it." Okay. So how much time passes from the time Callaway hears the shots to the time he reports it on the radio? Okay, let's say 2 minutes pass from the time that Oswald shoots Tippett to the time that Oswald is at the corner of Patton and Jefferson, which again is a little over a block. And Oswald was running, at least jogging anyway. So let's say it took 2 minutes. And let's say it takes Callaway another minute after watching the gunman go all the way down to, the corner of Patton and Jefferson. So let's say it takes Callaway another minute to get from his position up to 10th and Patton and over to the patrol car. So that's 3 minutes. Let's add 1 minute for air. Okay, so we have Callaway at the patrol car. And by the way, me adding the 1 minute for air favors the conspiracy theorist's time, not mine. So we have Callaway at the patrol car using the police radio roughly 4 minutes after the shots, if you follow what I'm saying here. Now, here's the thing. Callaway's report to the police dispatcher using the police radio took place at 1:19 to 1:20. So unless this whole thing took Callaway 11 minutes from the time he heard the shots to the time he gets to the police radio, which would have the shooting occurring like at 1:09 or 1:10, it's more likely he did all this in 3 or 4 minutes because he reported the shooting on the police mic at 1:19, 1:20, which again puts the shooting taking place perfectly at 1:15-ish.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, I mean that seems like a lock for the time of the shooting just by what's going over on the radios. Regardless of what they said the time was.
Right.
Okay.
The most important thing for me is that Murray Jackson, the dispatcher, had not been made aware of a shooting of a police officer yet by the citizens who were calling in to report it. He was made aware of it by TF Boley on the radio, on the police radio. This tells you that Boley was, in my opinion, that Boley did not his watch did not read 1:10 when he pulled up to the scene. His watch was probably 5 minutes slow or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like we had last time we had Oswald seen in the shoe store by Johnny Brewer, and what happens after that?
Okay, well you have so Johnny Brewer's in a shoe store, and the shoe store was on Jefferson Boulevard. Again, I said earlier it's a main thoroughfare there in Oak Cliff, very busy road, very busy street, and Brewer hears the police sirens going up and down Jefferson. Of course, they've now received word that the police have now received word that a police officer has been shot. Basically, they were given various addresses, but basically at the corner of 10th and Patton, there's a police officer who's been shot. And Brewer notices a man duck into the recessed area of the shoe store and didn't come into the lobby of the shoe store, but he ducked into the recessed area, pretended to look at shoes. And Brewer said basically he just looked, like he was a little scared. And in Brewer's opinion, he obviously was trying to avoid the police cars. So he's looking over his shoulder at the police cars, and when this man feels like he's safe to go back out to the sidewalk, he goes out to the sidewalk and proceeds walking west on the sidewalk. Brewer goes out to look down the street, and he notices the man walking towards the Texas Theater, and he turns the corner into the recessed area of the theater and disappears. This Brewer loses sight of him, and this is when Johnny Brewer goes up to Julia Postal, and she was the ticket taker. She was the ticket salesperson. And Brewer asked her, "Hey, did you sell a ticket to that fella?" And she said, "No, I don't believe I did." And of course, Brewer knew that she didn't because he saw the guy basically duck into the recessed area under the marquee. So we're going to discuss a few of the issues that some conspiracy theorists might have with the shooting of Jd Tippett, because there are people out there that believe that Oswald did not shoot Jd Tippett. Okay. So two different brands of bullets were involved in the shooting of Officer J.D. Tippett. You had the Winchester Westerns and also Remington Peters. Okay. All four of the shells and all four of the bullets were 38 specials. Oswald revolver was a 38. Okay. Now, when he was arrested, by the way, Oswald had 5 Winchester Westerns in his pocket, the left front pocket of his pants, and then he also had 3 of each. So he had 3 Winchester Westerns and 3 Remington Peters that were loaded inside the revolver. The revolver was fully loaded with 6 rounds when he was arrested. So the bullets that were removed from Tippett's body were 3 Winchester Westerns and 1 Remington Peters. Okay, now the shells found at the scene were 2 Winchester Westerns and 2 Remington Peters. Now let me say this. Ted Callaway testified that he heard 5 shots. He told Dale Myers, and by the way, if you've never read With Malice, I highly recommend it. It's a book written by Dale Myers, and it deals strictly with the shooting of Officer J.D. Tippett. But Ted Callaway was interviewed by Dale Myers, and he told Dale Myers that he heard 5 shots. He used to be in the Marine Corps, and when he heard the tat, 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 it reminded him of Morse code. He studied Morse code when he was in the Marine Corps. So because of this, Callaway was certain that there were 5 shots, even though there were various accounts, like, earlier when he was, back in the 60s, 1963, 1964, he said, I heard a number of shots. He didn't really put it at 5, but he told Dale Myers he was certain there were 5 shots. My point is, so you have the bullets removed from Tippett's body, 3 Winchester Westerns and 1 Remington Peters, but the shells found at the scene were 2 Winchester Westerns and 2 Remington Peters, so it doesn't match up. So if 5 shots were indeed fired, like Ted Callaway believes, then it could be that a bullet was never found. One of the bullets that was fired off was never found, and also one of the shells that Oswald threw to the ground were never found. So the missing bullet would be a Remington Peters, the missing shell would be a Winchester Western, and now you have 3 and 2 of shells and also a matching 3 and 2 of bullets. You would have 3 Winchester Western. You would have 3 Winchester Western shells and 2 Remington Peter shells, and you also have 3 Winchester Western bullets and 2 Remington Peter bullets if the missing bullet was Remington Peters. So there could have been a bullet that embarked itself in a tree or in a house that was eventually torn down, and there could have been a shell that was never found. Oswald could have been still messing with the gun trying to get shells out all the way down pat and damn near to Jefferson.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying there, because that would make no sense for to shoot him with different ammunition and leave different shells. That doesn't add up.
Yeah, and now see, here's the thing. Oswald had, so basically between his pants pocket and also what was loaded in the revolver that was taken from him during the scuffle at his arrest or at the theater, he had both Winchester Westerns and Remington Peters in his possession. Okay. Now, Tippett is killed by both Winchester Westerns and Remington Peters. Now, is that a coincidence that Oswald happened to have the same 2 brands of bullets on him when he's arrested as the 2 brands of bullets that are involved in the shooting of J.D. Tippett?
Could they match them to the revolver? The shells?
You mean as far as ballistic?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, all right, so the revolver, Oswald's 38 was originally, is originally designed to fire 38 Smith & Wesson bullets, but it was rechambered to shoot 38 specials. 38 specials are smaller in diameter, but they're a better ammunition, so the bullet was rechambered for to fire the 38 specials. Now the bullets had 5 lands and 5 grooves with a right twist. Now this is I should say this is the barrel of the revolver. 5 lands and 5 grooves with a right twist. The revolver originally was a 5-inch barrel that was shortened to 2 inches. Now, Joseph Nickel was a superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Identification Investigations for the state of Illinois. And he stated that one bullet had sufficient individual characteristics to where he concluded that that bullet was fired from Oswald's revolver, through ballistic testing. All 4 bullets and the revolver did have the same characteristics: 5 lands, 5 grooves with a right twist. Now, when I say all 4 bullets, I'm talking about the 4 bullets that were removed from Tippett that they were trying to test. Now, bullets from Tippett's body, they had similar scratches as test bullets that were fired from the revolver taken from Oswald. So when they got the revolver from Oswald, they fired off test bullets for ballistic comparisons.
Hmm.
And the bullets removed from Tippett's body had similar scratches as the test bullets. The bullets from Tippett's body had signs of gas erosion, and that's caused when a propellant escapes between the surface of the bullet and the inside of the barrel. So keep in mind, I told you a minute ago that Oswald's revolver was rechambered to fire the .38 Special. The .38 Special is smaller in diameter than the regular .38. So Oswald was shooting a smaller bullet in diameter than was meant for that barrel. Okay. Now that what happened there is that allowed gases, propellant, to escape between the surface of the bullet as the bullet made its way down the barrel after being fired off. Propellant escaped between the surface of the bullet and the inside of the barrel. Now this happens when the bullets that travel through the barrel are smaller than, significantly smaller than the barrel itself. So bullets from Tippett's body had signs of gas erosion, which it's caused when the propellant escapes between the surface of the bullet and the inside of the barrel. Okay. So I don't know. Now, as far as ballistic testing on the shells, I don't know if you. Now, first of all, let me say this: there's no scientific method to link spent shell casings with spent bullets. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't leak. I don't even think they can do it today. They couldn't do it in 1963, and I don't think they can do it today either. You can't take a spent shell casing and a spent bullet and link the two together. It's scientifically impossible. It was back then. I think it still is today. What's that?
I've heard conspiracy theorists claim that then you're like, hey, you can't do that.
You can't. You can't do it. So basically, when the trigger is pulled, when fired, a gun puts a distinct fingerprint on the shell. Okay, the shell is it's up against the breech face and the firing pin, and when the hammer makes contact with the primer, the bullet is fired and the shell is thrown back against the breech face. Now this places a distinct mark on the base of the shell, marks that are on the breech face of the shell. So the marks on the breech face matching the marks on the shell prove that the shell casing were fired from that weapon. Joseph Nickel, again, he was a superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation for the state of Illinois. Cortland Cunningham, Robert Frazier, and Charles Killian, these were all firearms identification unit of the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. Now, each of these four experts examined the shells found at the Tippit scene independent of each other. So they examined the shells and they examined Oswald's revolver. And each expert, independent of each other, determined that the shells were linked through this ballistic testing to the revolver, to the exclusion of every other weapon in the world. Now, when I say to the revolver, I'm talking about the revolver that was taken from Oswald when he was arrested inside the theater. So ballistic testing links the shells found at the scene to the revolver taken from Oswald.
What about the firing pin being broke or bent in the weapon?
Okay, so what happened there? That's an irresponsible. I believe it was a newspaper reporter, but it could have been a television reporter. But I think it was a newspaper reporter. There's no report. There's no official report anywhere by the Dallas Police or the FBI that mentions a bent firing pin. Okay, the reporter heard of the scuffle in the theater. We all know the story that Oswald, when he was arrested, he said, Nick McDonald was a police officer, told him to get on his feet. This is inside the theater. Oswald gets to his feet and says, "This is it, or it's all over now," one or the other. You hear both accounts. And then he punches McDonald in the face. Then he pulls the revolver and at the same time attempts to shoot Nick McDonald. And this is before the other officers could get to them. It's just the two of them, Oswald and McDonald, going back and forth. McDonald basically prevents the revolver from being fired, whether it was the webbing between his index finger and his thumb, stopping the hammer from making contact with the primer, or if he had his hand wrapped around the barrel of the revolver, therefore not allowing the revolver to rotate. Who really knows? But I'm speculating here, but I'm pretty certain that a reporter heard the story that Oswald tried to tried to fire off the revolver. It didn't fire. So he comes up with the idea. And again, this is just my opinion. This reporter comes up with the idea that the firing pin was bent. And that's why, it was this bent firing pin that saved McDonald's life. All right. So here's the thing, though. When the revolver was taken from Oswald, it was taken to police headquarters. Well, the FBI, I just told you, the 4 experts, along with Joseph Nickel of the state of Illinois, these guys examine this revolver and they fire off test rounds so that they compare these test rounds. They want to compare these spent shells with the shells found at the scene. There was no mention by any of these 4 fellas that the revolver didn't work and they had to fix the firing pin first before shooting it, shooting the test rounds. You follow me?
These shells at the scene, weren't they marked by an officer?
Well, Joe Poe. So basically, you have Domingo. Let's call them shells 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
So Domingo Benavides, when he gets out, keep in mind he goes over to the police mic and he tries to, report the shooting. Doesn't know how to work the mic. Well, anyway, the police show up and they're doing their thing at the scene, and Tippett's body's gone, taken away by the ambulance. Well, Benavides saw where the fleeing gunman had thrown the shells down. At least a couple of them. So he goes over and picks 2 of them up. He puts them in a Winston cigarette package. He turns them over to the police officer at the scene, probably the nearest officer to him, which happens to be Joe Poe, P-O-E. So Poe goes to Jim Lavelle and says, "Here, do you want these shells that a citizen just gave to me?" And Lavelle says, "No, there's no sense of me taking control of them. It's just going to add to the chain of possession. Go ahead and give them to Pete Barnes." Now, Pete Barnes was there with the crime lab. So Pete Barnes is the fellow that would have collected the evidence at the scene and taken it, to be stored. And so Poe turns these shells over to Pete Barnes. Poe gives varying accounts whether he marked the shells or not. He's at 1 minute he's fairly certain he did, but when he testified to the Warren Commission, he literally says in his testimony to the Warren Commission that he cannot be certain that he marked the shells. So
Okay.
The simple fact that he says that he can't be certain that he marked the shells, you can't say that Poe marked the shells and now the shells and evidence don't have Poe's markings on them. So these shells and evidence weren't the authentic shells found at the scene. You can't say that because Poe himself basically says he couldn't be certain whether he marked the shells or not. Okay. Now those are shells number 1 and 2. Those are the 2 found by Domingo Benavides. Well, we have shells number 3 and 4. There were 4 shells found at the scene. Shell number 3 was found by Barbara Davis around 2:00 that afternoon. The police were still at the scene when she found the shell, and she basically, this shell was recovered by Captain George Doty, who was also at the crime lab. He was Pete Barnes' boss. And then Doty marks the shell, and then he puts it with the other 2 that Poe had. And then the FBI interviewed Doty in June of '64. And he posited now the FBI designated the shells Q75, 76, 77, and 78, I believe it was. But Doty, in June of '64, when the FBI comes out to talk to him, he identifies Q76 as the shell that was turned over to him by Barbara Davis, which he retrieved and marked, and he found his marking on the shell. He was shown all 4 shells by the FBI, picked the shell that he thought it was because he saw his marking on there. Now, shell number 4 was found by Virginia Davis later that evening. Okay, once the authorities had already left the scene. Virginia Davis was young. I think Barbara Davis was about 19 or 20. Virginia Davis was like 15 or 16. So Barbara Davis calls the police that evening to report that her sister-in-law had found yet another shell. So the Dallas police send out Detective Brown and Doherty. Now, this is not to be confused with Doty, who I talked about that took possession of the 3rd shell that was found by Barbara Davis. So Detectives Brown and Detective Doherty, they were dispatched to pick up this 4th shell. And while they were there, they went ahead and picked up the 2 girls, Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis, and took them to headquarters, to view the lineup. So Doherty, when they got downtown, he gave that 4th shell to J.C. Day of the crime lab. Now, J.C. Day is the same fellow that was in possession of the rifle, but we're going back to the assassination with that. So Doherty gave the shell to J.C. Day at the crime lab, and then Doherty, when he was questioned by the FBI, he identified Q75 as the shell that was given to him by Virginia Davis, the one that was found by Virginia Davis at the scene. So, in other words, both shells were positively identified by the member of the Dallas Police Department who handled them, Doty in one case, Doherty in the other case. You follow?
Why? Yeah. Why do people say that there's no chain of possession? It sounds to me like that there's, you can follow the chain of possession easy.
Yep, that's what I'm telling you. The chain of possession for the 2 Benavides shells that were turned over to Poe.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say because Poe didn't mark them, even though Poe did give the shells right there at the scene to Pete Barnes, who placed them into evidence, or I imagine Barnes put them in like a little evidence bag.
Uh-huh.
And then the 3rd shell, the one found by Barbara Davis that she turned over to Captain Doty, he put that shell with the other 2. So now Pete Barnes is in possession of 3 shells. Well, Doty marked it first. And then, of course, the 4th shell, when Doherty retrieved it that night, he turned it over to J.C. Day. And again, Doherty identifies Q75 as the shell that was given to him by the Davis girls, which was shell number 4. So the chain of custody for shells number 3 and number 4, the 2 Davis shells is what they're called, is clear and intact. I believe also that the chain of possession for the earlier 2 shells found by Benavides turned over to Poe is also clear and intact. However, since Poe didn't mark them, I can accept that there could be an issue as far as trying to prove a clear and intact chain of possession for those 2 shells. But the shells number 3, shells number 4, the 2 shells found by the Davis girls, would be admitted at trial because there's not a problem. There's not a problem with the chain of possession of those 2 shells.
Yeah, I mean, cause I hear people say that, and I've heard people, all the evidence would have been thrown. I'm like, what's going to be? What would they have to? The defense have to challenge off the weapons? I mean, I can't see what their challenges would be about the evidence.
Yeah, see, chain of possession begins when law enforcement takes over a piece of evidence. So some conspiracy theorists will like to argue that, well, the 4 shells are kind of fishy because they all 4 were found by a citizen and not by law enforcement. Well, here's the thing, though, that doesn't affect the chain of custody, because the chain of custody does not begin. Let's take shell number 3, for example. This was the shell found around 2 o'clock that afternoon by Barbara Davis and turned over to Captain George Doty at the crime lab. The chain of custody begins when Doty takes possession of that shell. Now, Barbara Davis could have handled that shell and showed it to Virginia Davis and went inside and showed it to her dad and showed it to William Scoggins, who was the cab driver. It doesn't matter. The chain of possession legally begins when Doty, law enforcement, in this case George Doty, takes possession of that shell. And that shell, the chain of possession from the moment Doty took it, because he put his markings in it and he identified his markings, the chain of possession for that shell is clear and intact. And at a trial, had there been a trial, that would have been used against Oswald, because that shell, by the 4 experts I mentioned earlier, was linked to the revolver that was taken from Oswald when he was arrested, to the exclusion of any other revolver in the world. And the same can be said for the 4th shell, which was found later that evening by Virginia Davis, that was taken over by possession by detectives Doherty and Brown. There is no problem with the chain of custody of shells number 3 and 4, and I don't think there's a problem with the chain of custody of shell numbers 1 and 2 either. But I can at least acknowledge that if a conspiracy theorist wants to argue it, I ain't going to waste my time arguing back with it. Put it that way.
Okay. All right. So let's see. So we was into the rest. All right, let's go back to some of the witnesses. How many people was brought to the lineup?
Okay. So on Friday evening, Helen Markham was the first to attend a lineup. And now, for those who aren't very familiar with the case, Helen Markham was the lady who was on her way to catch her bus. She had a 2-block walk from her apartment to the bus stop. She reaches the halfway point. She's 1 block from her bus stop. She's at the corner of 10th and Patton. She's the one screaming, "He killed that man, he killed that man." And she attended a lineup that evening, and she positively identified Lee Harvey Oswald, who was number 2 in that lineup, as the man she saw shoot the policeman. Okay. Again, take her Warren Commission testimony. We can throw that out. Doesn't even matter. It doesn't change the fact that on the night of the 22nd, 1963, she picked out the number 2 man as the man who shot the police officer. Now, Ted Callaway and Sam Ginyard. Now, these are the 2 fellows that were working in the Deutsch Motor Company on the car lot on Patton. They both went to a lineup, and they both identified Lee Oswald as the man they saw running down Patton with a gun in his hand. Okay. Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis attended a lineup again on Friday evening. And both of them said that Lee Oswald in the lineup, he's the one they picked, was the man that they saw cutting across their front yard with a gun in his hand.
5.
Okay. What's that?
I was just counting up the people that you.
Okay. All right.
5.
So you have William Scoggins. Now he's the cab driver. He attended lineup on Saturday, the next day, and he identified Oswald as the man that he saw running from the scene with a gun in his hand. Keep in mind that Oswald was running straight towards him. Now, Scoggins did get out of the cab and proceed to cross the street like he was going to go hide somewhere, but then he returned to the cab. He ducked down, and you can just picture Scoggins, peeping up over the back quarter panel, over the back trunk, and sees the gunman cutting across the yard, running straight in his direction, and then proceeds south on Patton. And Scoggins, he positively identified Lee Oswald as the man that he saw running from the scene with a gun in his hand. Now you have the 4 fellows at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company. Now, this is the car lot that was a block south of the shooting scene. These are the fellows that heard the shots, went to the balcony, and all 4 of them saw the gunman running down the street towards them before heading west on Jefferson. Now this is L.J. Lewis, Pat Patterson, Harold Russell, and Warren Reynolds. So the FBI came out, and now these guys did not attend a lineup, okay? But the FBI came out and interviewed these guys later in January and showed them all a photo of Lee Harvey Oswald. And 3 of them picked the man in that photo, which was a photo of Oswald. I think it was a New Orleans arrest photo of Oswald from the summer of '63 when he was arrested in New Orleans. So all 3 of them picked the man in that photo as the man they saw running down Patton with a gun in his hand. Now the 4th fella, L.J. Lewis, didn't make a positive identification one way or the other. He just felt like I just didn't get a good enough look. And L.J. Lewis is the one that went back inside to call the police. So now you had the 2 fellows that were a block east that I started off with was Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith. Jimmy Burt could not identify the man as being Oswald. The FBI came out and talked to him, and he failed to make a positive identification of Oswald. Bill Smith, the same thing. However, in his Warren Commission testimony, Bill Smith does say, he's asked at one point, "What did you see?" And he says, "I saw the officer fall and Oswald running from the scene." You can take it with a grain of salt as to whether that's a positive identification of Oswald or not, but nevertheless, that's what he said. And then Domingo Benavides was perhaps the closest person to the shooting scene. He was the one that was driving his pickup truck towards the patrol car when he heard the shots. He swerves over to the right and he ducks down. And he peeps up and sees the gunman running away. Benavides saw the gunman back up onto the sidewalk and then proceed to head over to the corner before going south on Patton. And when the police came out to get Ted Callaway and Sam Ginyard, they also wanted to get Benavides. Well, Benavides declined to go to the lineup because he told him he just felt like he couldn't make a positive identification one way or the other. Now, Oswald, when he's running past the Blues Texaco station to go into the parking lot behind the Texaco station, he passes 2 people, Mary Brock and Robert Brock. Now, Robert Brock was a mechanic at the service station. Mary Brock was his wife. Both of these saw the man run past them to go to the parking lot behind the service station. Robert Brock when the FBI visited both of these, they had a photo, probably the same photo that they had when they visited the guys at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company. Robert Brock, being shown a photograph of Oswald, felt like he couldn't make an identification one way or the other. Mary Brock said that the man in the photo, again, that was Oswald, is indeed the same man that she saw run past her, making his way to the parking lot behind the Texaco. So some people may say, well, so what? If Mary Brock did see Oswald, it doesn't mean he killed a cop. Okay, but here's the thing. Oswald is passed on from one set of witnesses to the next till he disappears behind the service station. So, in other words, Mary Brock, she saw the same man that was seen by Warren Reynolds and Pat Patterson. Now, keep in mind, Warren Reynolds and Pat Patterson, they were following Oswald from the corner of Jefferson and Patton, 1 block, to the corner of Jefferson and Crawford before Oswald disappeared behind the service station. That's when they lost sight of him.
Did Reynolds' first statement, though, did he not say he hesitated to, or he wouldn't identify Oswald?
Okay, so Okay, so there was on January 21st, the FBI came out and interviewed Warren Reynolds. So the FBI report dated January 22nd, the next day, and in that report, Warren Reynolds told the FBI that he was of the opinion that the man he saw was Oswald. Now, Warren Reynolds was shot on January 23rd. So, point being, Reynolds, before he was ever shot, was already of the opinion that the man he saw was Oswald. So you'll have conspiracy theorists like to argue that, well, Warren Reynolds said it wasn't Oswald, and then all of a sudden he gets shot in the head, he survives, and now he's saying the man was Oswald. That's not true. Warren Reynolds said he was of the opinion that the man he saw was Oswald before he was shot in the head. But he stopped short of making a 100% firm identification. He just said he was of the opinion that the man he saw was Oswald.
That was there was not a statement he gave a couple days following the shooting, or January was the first statement that was given?
January was the first statement. January was now he's seen on Warren Reynolds is captured in film footage that day. Talking.
I've read the report. I can't remember how this first one was worded, but he said he hesitated to identify him, or conspiracy theorists say he refused to identify him, but he did not refuse him. That didn't happen. He didn't refuse to identify him.
Basically, the exact phrase he used was of the opinion. So he told the FBI before he was shot in the head that he was of the opinion the man was Oswald. But again, he stopped short of saying as a fact that the man he saw was Oswald.
Well, what about Benavidez?
So Benavidez, so the Dallas Police Department came out to get Ted Callaway and Sam Ginyard to take them for a lineup. But they wanted to get Benavidez as well. They were supposed to collect all three of them to take them to a lineup on Friday night. Well, Benavidez declined to go because he told him right there, I just feel like I can't make identification. I didn't really get a good enough look at him to say one way or the other. I wouldn't recognize him if I saw him. So Benavidez never went to the lineup. All right.
What about his brother getting shot?
Unrelated.
Did he not? But is it true that he did not identify Oswald until after?
Well, here's the thing. So when I told you earlier, Benavidez he was interviewed in that 1967 special called The Warren Report, put out by CBS. And in that special, Benavidez is telling Eddie Barker, what happened at the scene. And he said, so I saw Oswald, or the man that shot him, and then he goes on to tell the story. So Benavidez does say the name Oswald during that special that aired on CBS, but then he corrects himself quickly and saying, or the man that shot him. Actually, that was in his testimony. I'm sorry. I'm confusing the CBS special with his testimony, but
okay.
Basically, the point being that Domingo Benavidez's brother was killed before. It's unrelated to the assassination or the murder of Jd Tippett. They found the person who did it. It was the guy wasn't even targeting Benavidez. The guy ended up going to prison. He's not a conspirator. He wasn't a killer for the FBI.
The guy who shot him.
Yeah, the guy who shot Eddie Benavidez, which is Domingo's brother. Yeah, they found out who did it, and the guy went to prison.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get to the
one more thing real quick while we're on that.
Sorry.
A lot of conspiracy theorists will sit there and say how the point they try to make is that Domingo Benavidez, the witness to the Tippit killing, and Eddie Benavidez, his brother, the guy who was killed in a bar, resembled each other. Okay. Uh-huh. Yet not one conspiracy theorist who makes this claim has ever posted photos of these two men side by side showing just exactly how they resemble each other. For all we know, Eddie Benavidez was a redhead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now that you said that, because I've heard that claim before. I've never seen a picture of the brother. Yeah.
Yeah. So all they want to do is repeat myth that they heard instead of actually looking into it and try to find a photo of Eddie Benavidez. They just want to keep repeating it as a fact when they don't themselves know whether it's a fact or not. I'm not saying they didn't look alike. I'm just saying I've never seen a photo of Eddie Benavidez to know whether they did, whether they didn't.
They're all probably chomping at the bit at Akila Clemens. What about Miss Clemens? Two shooters.
Yeah.
Different directions. Two gunmen.
Yeah. So Akila Clemens, man, it's debatable really whether she even saw the shooter or not. Okay. She was in a house at the corner. The address was 327 East 10th, but it was basically the second house to the west of the northwest corner of the intersection of 10th and Patton. So you had Helen Markham was walking south on Patton for 2 blocks to go to her bus stop. And when she got at the halfway point, which is the corner of 10th and Patton, 2 houses west of her was the house that Akila Clemens was inside. So Clemens was working for a family there called the Smothermans. And in July of 64, Mark Lane was on what's called the Barry Gray show. And he basically said that we have a statement by a witness, and she was questioned by the FBI at our request, which is not true. The FBI by this point had not interviewed Akila Clemens, but for some reason, Mark Lane felt the need to tell that on this TV show. And in 1966, when Lane was filming, the documentary Rush to Judgment, he says that even though the FBI interviewed over 25,000 witnesses, they, quote, inexplicably failed to question Akila Clemens. Now, he says this in 1966 for the Rush to Judgment film. Yet in July of 64, he tells Barry Gray on the Barry Gray show that she was questioned by the FBI at his request. So which is it? One of them's a direct lie. They can't both be true. Okay, and there's no evidence by the FBI. There's no evidence that Lane talked to the FBI about Clemens. And basically, Akila Clemens' answers didn't fit Lane's narrative, so he would cut and ask her the questions again. And this time he'd ask her some leading questions. Now, there was another lady that came out and interviewed Akila Clemens. Her name was Shirley Martin. And
yes,
Clemens tells the story. Now, Mark Lane wants to act like Akila Clemens is a witness for there being 2 gunmen, or basically 2 killers that Tippett confronted. But when Shirley Martin, who I believe Dale Myers, I got all this from Dale Myers, but he hunted her, basically I think she was a housewife, came down from Wisconsin or something like that. But she interviewed Akila Clemens, and Akila Clemens tells the same story to her that she had told to Mark Lane. Only difference is when she's telling Shirley Martin the story, the 2 the 2 fellas, the one gunman and the other guy, they weren't together. It was simply, let me just say it this way. When Akila Clemens was talking to Shirley Martin, she gave no hint whatsoever as she's explaining the scenario as it went down that the gunman was with this other guy. They were literally across the street from each other. Okay. And she tells that to Mark Lane. Mark Lane says, basically, cut, let's do it again. And Mark Lane keeps asking her questions, trying to tie in these 2 guys together. It's dishonest on Mark Lane's part.
And I think it's on David Von Pite's site. You can go and read where it is broke down, each cut until Lane puts the words in her mouth.
Exactly.
That he wants.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I mean, you can see. He put the words in her mouth until she said the right questions. And from what I gathered, Lane's implication was he was trying to put Jack Ruby there. And
yeah, exactly. Yes, about the guy being stocky and all that.
And he didn't bring a picture of him.
Right.
Here's my opinion. I mean, that's just what I've gathered is she was inside the house. She heard the shooting. By the time she got there, she probably seen the people that was gathering around. And who was it? Callaway had picked up his weapon.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think she probably seen. I mean, if she's seen anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess it all depends on how fast she got out there and was able to see what was going on. Because if she got out there within 20 seconds, then she didn't see Callaway.
Right.
But if she went out a few minutes later, then she very easily could have seen Callaway. Because again, if you remember the scenario I laid out for you earlier with Callaway, he reported this shooting on the police radio at 119-120. And then after that is when he would have grabbed the revolver, Tippett service revolver, and recruit William Scoggins, the cab driver, drive around looking for the gunman who just fled, 5 minutes earlier. So it all depends on how fast Akila Clemens, made her way out to see what she may have seen. It just depends on how fast she got out there.
So no chance Harry Elson was on scene. Roscoe White.
Well, Roscoe White, first of all, and I'm just going by memory on this, but he was a recruit at the time. He didn't even have a uniform yet, and he was at he was with a class, if you want to call it that, maybe perhaps on a field trip, so to speak.
Mhm.
They were investigating a break-in in North Dallas at the time of the assassination. Okay, so Roscoe White was nowhere near Dealey Plaza at 12:30. He was investigating with a class of other recruits a break-in, a burglary in North
I didn't know
Dallas.
that.
Oh yeah. So if he's there, then he's probably also not at 10th and Patton at 1:15.
Okay, yeah, because they love to drag him into it.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing though. Before we talk about Harry Olson, let's go over this real quick. So you have let me go all over these Tippit witnesses. You had Jimmy Burt, Bill Smith.
Mhm.
You had Domingo Benavides. You had Helen Markham, Barbara Davis, Virginia Davis, William Scoggins, Sam Ginyard, Ted Callaway, L.J. Lewis, Pat Patterson, Harold Russell, Warren Reynolds, and I'm just counting them as we go. So that's 13 guys. That's 13 witnesses. And of those 13 witnesses, okay, I'm going to put Bill Smith in the category of not positively identifying Oswald because he told the FBI he couldn't be certain. So let's just go ahead and put him there. So you had Bill Smith and Jimmy Burt. You had Benavides, who failed to identify. And you had L.J. Lewis, who was at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, failed to identify. So those four people told the FBI, or in Benavides' case, Dallas Police Department, that they couldn't be certain that the man they saw was Oswald. However, none of the four told the FBI or the Dallas Police Department or the Warren Commission that the man was not Oswald.
I see where you're going.
Right. So now you have Barbara Davis, Virginia Davis, Helen Markham, William Scoggins, Ted Callaway, Sam Ginyard. Every one of these witnesses attended a lineup, whether it be on Friday night or Saturday, and every one of them positively identified Oswald as the man they saw either shooting the police officer or running from the scene with a gun in his hand. And then further down at the Johnny Reynolds Motor Company, you had Pat Patterson, Harold Russell, and Warren Reynolds. All three of these guys, and again, we talked about Reynolds already. He said he was of the opinion the man was Oswald. So based on that, I'm going to put him in the category of a positive identification. So again, of those 13 witnesses, then you also had Mary Brock at the Texaco station who said the man was Oswald, and her husband Robert Brock said he couldn't be certain. So let's say 15 people saw the gunman either before the shooting, during the shooting, or after the shooting. Okay, and not one of them said that the man they saw was not Lee Oswald. Okay, but you had Helen Markham, Barbara Davis, Virginia Davis, William Scoggins, Ted Callaway, Sam Ginyard, Warren Reynolds, Pat Patterson, Harold Russell, and Mary Brock. That's 10, and all 10 of them identified Oswald. So you have 10 positive identifications of Oswald. You have 4 who said they couldn't be certain one way or the other, but they didn't say it was not Oswald. Then you had Bill Smith, who could kind of, he could be put in either category, but I'm putting him in the category of failed to identify Oswald, but didn't say it wasn't Oswald. So you have 10 people positively identifying Oswald. You have 5 people saying they couldn't be sure, but you have 0 of the 15 said that the man was not Oswald.
Nobody refused to identify him.
Nobody. Well, no.
Oh, I'm
You
sorry.
had 5 people refused to identify him, but they didn't say it was not Oswald. They didn't say it was somebody else. None of them said Oswald was not the guy. They simply said, I can't be sure one way or the other. And there's a difference.
Phrase it. Yeah. So so out of all those witnesses, there was nobody that said it was not him.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, conspiracy theorists are going to throw out witnesses. I put, if you could see me right now, air quotes around the word witnesses. Conspiracy theorists are going to throw out witnesses who said the man wasn't Oswald, but these aren't real witnesses. So when I talk about the Tippit case, I talk about the witnesses because that's all you should talk about are the witnesses and the evidence. A lot of conspiracy theorists are going to bring up people who weren't witnesses, like Frank Wright, for example, who went out to the street, looked down the street. He was in the duplex with Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith. He goes out to the street when he hears the shots. By the time he gets out there, unless Oswald's hanging around drinking a Coke by the patrol car, or Dr. Pepper, when Frank Wright gets out there, Oswald's gone. So Frank Wright he's not a witness. Frank Wright never saw the gunman. He never saw the gunman at all. He's not a witness. And people will bring up other witnesses that what they're calling witnesses are just simply not witnesses. If you want to discuss the case in earnest and try to figure out what happened, let's talk about the real witnesses and the real evidence.
In all honesty, though, Markham's the only person that watched the shooting from beginning to end. Is that correct?
Yeah, Markham is the only one that's, she saw the patrol car pull over. She saw the man walk over to the patrol car. She saw the officer get out slowly, nonchalant, relaxed, not like he was alarmed or, under heavy precaution or anything. And then she saw the other fellow who was walking basically pull out his gun and shoot him from across the hood a number of times. Then she saw the officer fall and the man run from the scene. So yeah, she's the only one that saw all this. Nobody else saw, because Benavides, even though he was the closest to the scene, he wasn't even looking when the shots rang out. He knew the patrol car was right there in front of him. He saw the two men talking, because Oswald was talking, or the killer was talking to the police officer through the vent window on the passenger side. He saw that, but at the same time, you picture you're driving down the street and you see that, to your left there, you see a police car pulled over talking to a guy. You're going to notice it, but you're also going to put your attention back to the street in front of you. Benavides said he wasn't actually watching when the shots rang out, even though he's right there. So, quite honestly, in my opinion, Benavides is just as much of a witness to the shooting as Markham is. But technically, if you want to be technical about it, Helen Markham is the only one that saw the shooting go down. You
mentioned something there that I wanted to ask about. I wonder, because I've heard that her describe that too. What Tippett was, if he knew he had the assassin, because like she said, it seems like he's very relaxed. I wonder what he was thinking then. Do I have this guy? Or because he seemed, it looks like that Oswald may have been on his way if he'd have played things right.
Wouldn't it be? Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice to be a fly on the wall on the hood of that car, so to speak, and to know the conversation that went down between the two of them? We don't even know why Tippett felt the need to pull over and talk to Oswald, unless it's simply because Oswald switched directions. Again, Jimmy Burt has Oswald walking towards the approaching patrol car. William Scoggins, by the time he notices the patrol car pull over, he sees the man walking away from the patrol. So Oswald at some point turned around and started walking away from Tippett's approaching patrol car. Is that all that there was to it to make Tippett want to pull over and question him, or was there more? Who knows? What if Oswald simply fidgeted with his gun for a second and Tippett saw that? I'm not speculating, and I admit I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm saying it could be a dozen reasons why Tippett felt the need to pull over. Did Oswald for a second have the gun in his hand for some stupid reason, and Tippett saw him put it back in his belt? Decided to ask him about that. Who knows? Who knows? I'm not saying that's the case. What I don't believe, the Warren Commission hypothesized that the general description of the suspect wanted in the assassination of the president, his height, weight, hair color, age, et cetera, went out over the police tapes, be on the lookout for blah, blah, blah. And that would have described, 50% of the men in Texas. So I don't believe that Tippett pulled Oswald. I say pull him over, but I don't believe Tippett pulled up alongside Oswald to talk to him because he felt that Oswald fit the physical description from Dealey Plaza. If that would have been the case, Tippett would have got out with his gun already drawn, and he would have, told him to freeze right there, get his hands up. He didn't do that. He basically pulled up alongside Oswald, asked him a couple of questions, I assume, didn't like the answers he was getting, so he wanted to get out to question the man further. And those were the last actions of his life.
Because when he got out, Oswald shot him across the hood, correct? Or did he turn the corner?
Yes. Yeah, they were across the hood. Okay. So Tippett gets out of the driver's side door. Once he gets out, he proceeds to walk towards the front of the patrol car, to walk around the front of the car to talk to the guy who was standing on the passenger side by the front where the windshield meets the hood, standing about right there. So as Tippett got pretty level with where the windshield meets the hood on the driver's side, Oswald pulls the revolver out, backs up a couple of steps to get separation between him and the patrol car, and fires the shots from across the hood and hits Tippett 4 times. And then Benavides sees Oswald after this back up all the way to the sidewalk and then proceed to unload the revolver as he's making his way over to the corner. Because there was like a little stretch of grass between the curb and the sidewalk. So Oswald was on the curb talking to Tippett, backed up a couple of steps into the grass, fired the shots across the hood, and then went up to the sidewalk and then headed west to the corner.
Okay.
So Tippett falls. According to Ted Callaway, he did. He fell on his revolver. So Tippett probably at this point noticed, even though he got out of his car in a relaxed manner, he noticed the gunman, the fella he was questioning, basically back up and pull out a revolver. So Tippett tried to get his revolver out. Evidence of that is the testimony of the witnesses who say that Tippett was laying on top of his service revolver. Okay, so Oswald just got the drop on him.
Yeah, so he never really had a chance. I mean,
right.
If he says about he's getting out, Oswald's already drawing down on him, and by the time he reaches, he's already been hit.
Exactly. So just because Tippett was reaching for his revolver doesn't mean it doesn't conflict with the idea that Tippett got out of the patrol car in a relaxed manner, because the two aren't related. He got out of the patrol car in a relaxed manner because he didn't know that the man he was talking to was about to pull out a revolver and shoot him. Once he saw the man pull out a revolver and begin to aim for him, that's when I believe Tippett went for his service revolver, but just wasn't able to do it fast enough.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. He's laying there. There's one I meant to ask you about earlier. Gosh, I wish I could think of the guy's name now. Went to James Files tells a story, came to this hotel room and gave him the revolvers to get rid of this. I just burned a cop.
Yeah.
God, I wish I could think of his name.
I can't keep a straight face when we talk about James Files.
I guess what I'm asking is, conspiracy theorists killing Tippett. I mean, why Tippett? Why is he the one that picked? What is I've seen people try to draw him into the assassin. He was involved in the assassinations. Yeah. I mean,
you mean as far as Tippett being sent to silence Oswald? Is that what you mean, or?
Well, any of it, sent to silence Oswald, sent to pick him up, to take him to the airport. I mean, they did everything they could and then I'm now seeing almost a character assassination of him. He's having an affair, or he's selling drugs or stuff like that. And why is what's Tippett's role in the conspiracy? I guess is more about
the bottom line is this regarding that stuff is every single person that you will hear about that wants to talk about Tippett either being sent to silence Oswald or sent to pick him up and take him somewhere so he can fly out of the country, or whatever their theories are, they're saying all this without any evidence of it. There's zero evidence of any of those claims, not one tiny shred, and I mean not even one tiny shred of evidence is there to support that claim. There's none. Now, Tippett was having an affair. There is evidence of that, and that comes from the waitress herself. She testified to the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 70s. But that doesn't mean he was involved in any conspiracy, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I've just I've heard that and that's what how are you drawing him into this? I've heard him people saying he was the shooter on the knoll or whatever. And
the human mind craves a mystery more than it desires the truth.
That's a good
from Dan Rather. Yeah,
that's
mind craves a mystery more than it desires the truth. It's man in a window shooting man in a car. Man leaves building, shoots police officer. That's boring. So they want to spice it up, and they want to get Tippett involved in the plot because it's nice and juicy, but it's fiction. There's no evidence for any of it.
I mean, because the character assassination of now. I mean, I've heard so much other stuff, and I've really got another author on the book or on the Tippett murder. And I was like, what does that have to do with with the whole case?
Right.
If he's having an affair, how you tying that in?
Yeah. Now, one thing we haven't talked about, by the way, is the jacket that was found in the Texaco parking lot.
I forgot to put it up.
Yeah. So basically, if you remember, I told you that Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith, these are the two guys that were out in the front yard, a block east of the shooting scene, and they go over to the shooting scene. They look down at the body, and they mill around for a few moments, and then they know that they saw the killer flee south on Patton, so they go over to the corner of 10th and Patton, and they go south on Patton. When they get halfway down the block, one of them said that they had it in their mind to go all the way down to Jefferson, but when they got halfway down the block, They looked to the west in the alley and they saw the gunman, the man who just shot the police officer moments earlier. They saw him in the alley, almost down to the next street. Now, if you know your geography in Oak Cliff, and Chris, I know you and I were there, last March, that alley where they saw the cop killer meets up with the back of the parking lot of the Texaco station. Now, in that parking lot of the Texaco station, a jacket was found underneath a car, underneath one of the cars. And so Earlene Roberts she was the housekeeper at the rooming house on Beckley. And she told a reporter on the afternoon of the assassination that Oswald left the rooming house and he was wearing a short gray coat. And then she told the Warren Commission that he was zipping it up as he went out the door. Okay. Helen Markham, now these are the Tippit witnesses. Helen Markham said that the killer was wearing a jacket. It was a grayish tan. Domingo Benavides said that the killer was wearing a jacket. It was light beige. Barbara Davis said the man cutting across her yard was wearing a dark coat. Virginia Davis said the killer cutting across the yard, she was standing right beside Barbara Davis. She said the jacket was light brown or tan. And it's interesting that these two women are standing right beside each other. One of them said it was a dark coat. One of them said it was light brown or tan, but it doesn't matter. They were still talking about the same guy. Okay.
Right.
So Ted Callaway, he said that the jacket was a light tannish gray. Sam Ginyard said it was light gray. William Scoggin said it was light colored or light blue. Bill Smith said it was light brown, and Jimmy Burt said it was light colored. Okay. So I don't even know what that is. Earlene Roberts. So Helen Markham, Benavides, Davis is 4, Callaway's 5, Ginyard 6, William Scoggin 7, Bill Smith and Jimmy Burt is 9. So if you don't count Earlene Roberts at the rooming house, you had those 9 witnesses that said the man that shot the police officer or ran from the scene afterwards was wearing a jacket. And I just gave you a description of what all 9 of them said about the jacket. But nevertheless, even if the jacket was rainbow colored,
they all said he had a jacket on.
He was still wearing a jacket. So Oswald is he's seen by Johnny Brewer in front of the shoe store. And Brewer said that he was wearing the brown shirt that Oswald, Brewer didn't say it like this, but basically he's talking about the shirt that Oswald was wearing when he was arrested, the brown outer shirt along with the white T-shirt. But Johnny Brewer specifically asked, was he wearing a jacket? And Brewer said, no, he wasn't wearing a jacket. So let's go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No.
So let's skip 10th and Patton. Let's pretend for a moment that Oswald never made his way to 10th and Patton. We have him at the rooming house, leaving in a short gray coat, zipping it up as he went out the door. We have him in front of the shoe store, Hardy's shoe store, seen by Johnny Brewer, without a jacket on Jefferson Boulevard by the Texas Theater. Forget 10th and Patton, okay? Why did Oswald get rid of the jacket that he was wearing as he left the rooming house by the time he was seen by Johnny Brewer? I don't care if the jacket was red, white, and blue. Nevertheless, he was wearing a jacket when he left the rooming house. He was not wearing a jacket when he was seen by Johnny Brewer. And oh, by the way, a jacket was found hidden underneath a car behind the Texaco station where we know the cop killer was in that very near vicinity based on what Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith tell us.
What is the thing that the conspiracy theorists bring up about dry cleaner tag on the coat?
Yeah, well, so the jacket found on the underneath one of the cars behind the Texaco station had a laundry tag on it, and the FBI, they canvassed. I think it was Texas and New Orleans, 1,000 whatever the number is, 700 some odd dry cleaners or laundromats, and they couldn't find a similar marking or similar tag used by any of these businesses. So they never were able to find where this laundry tag originated from. And conspiracy theorists will like to argue that Oswald was frugal and therefore wouldn't be spending the money to have his jacket laundered or dry cleaned. And that may be true. But this jacket, though, there's an FBI report. Sometime back in the 90s, Dale Myers and Todd Vaughn, they were at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, and they're going through files and they're just looking for anything that may have been missed. And Dale Myers finds a FBI report, and it mentions fibers, microscopic fibers that were found inside one of the sleeves of this jacket that was found on the ground underneath the car behind the Texaco station. This is Warren Commission Exhibit 162 is the jacket. So I'll just call it, it's 162 or the jacket. But so Dale Myers shows this document to Todd Vaughn. And basically what this document says is that there were microscopic fibers removed from one of the sleeves of the jacket. These microscopic fibers were compared to test fibers that were removed from the shirt that Oswald was wearing when he was arrested. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you compare fibers forensically, you're doing so based on three characteristics: color, shade, and twist. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the FBI report that I'm referring to basically said that the fibers that were found inside the sleeve of the jacket were the same color, shade, and twist as were the test fibers that were removed from the shirt that Oswald was wearing when he was arrested. Now, by the way, fibers were also found, microscopic fibers were also found inside a crevice of the rifle between the wood stock and the butt plate.
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a little crevice there, and there were microscopic, there was like a tuft of fibers that were removed from that. And these fibers also were the same color, shade, and twist as the fibers that were removed, the test fibers removed from Oswald's shirt that he was wearing when he was arrested. So getting back to something else I wanted to say, these fibers. So basically, I think this FBI report was dated December of '63 was the date of the report. And I think Dale Myers found this sometime in the 90s. But what it said was these microscopic fibers, they were dark blue, gray black, and orange yellow cotton fibers. So the shirt and the fibers found inside the sleeve of the jacket, they consisted of cotton fibers that were dark blue, and then also gray black, and also orange yellow. And again, these were the same color, shade, and twist as the fibers that Oswald, from his shirt that he was wearing when he was arrested. Now, does that mean that Oswald was wearing does that fiber evidence alone prove that Oswald was wearing that jacket since he was wearing that shirt? No, the answer is no. It doesn't prove it. All right. But what it does say is that somebody was wearing that jacket who was also wearing a shirt that had the exact same fiber, exact same characteristic fibers that were taken from the arrest shirt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, good, because I wanted to bring that. This next thing I wanted to bring up. What about the second Oswald? The guy's name changed his story and said he sold him popcorn.
You're talking about at the Texas Theater?
Yes.
You're talking about Butch Burroughs?
Yeah, and then they said the other guy, God, I can't think of his name, ran the hobby store, Bernard Hare.
Oh yeah, Bernard Hare. Yeah. He said he saw a man being led out back.
Yeah, so it was there. Butch Burroughs, did he sell popcorn to Oswald at what,
Okay.
110? And
Well, here's the thing. So in 1987, Butch Burroughs was interviewed by Jim Mars when Jim Mars was writing his book, Crossfire. I think it was Crossfire, right? Yeah. So I had a brain cramp there for a second, but so Jim Mars was writing his book Crossfire. He interviewed Butch Burroughs, and then also in 1988. Probably because of the interview with Jim Mars for Crossfire, Butch Burroughs is interviewed for the documentary "The Men Who Killed Kennedy."
Mm-hmm.
And in "The Men Who Killed Kennedy," he that's when he says that Oswald entered the theater 106, 107. Which obviously, if Oswald's in the theater at 106, 107, he's not shooting Tippit at 114. Okay.
Right.
But here's the thing. In 1964, when he testified to the Warren Commission, Butch Burroughs is asked straight up, did you see him come in the theater? He said no. Okay, now for those, we should probably start at the beginning for those who don't know. Butch Burroughs worked at the Texas Theater, and his part of his duties was to take the ticket stub from the patrons. As the patron is outside buying the ticket from Julia Postal, who's the lady that sold the tickets, they take the ticket inside, they give it to Butch Burroughs, and he allows them to enter the theater. He also was selling the concessions, popcorn, candy, etc. And that's when he tells Jim Mars and also the Men Who Killed Kennedy that Oswald entered the theater 106, 107, makes the claim that he sold him popcorn and all that stuff. But He didn't say anything like that in his testimony to the Warren Commission in 1964. In 1964, he makes no mention whatsoever of seeing Oswald. In fact, he's asked very directly, "Did you see him come in?" He said no. Here's the thing: when you talk about Butch Burroughs telling this, in my opinion, a very obvious lie, and I can also put Beverly Oliver, who people know as supposedly she's claiming she was the babushka lady, and Ed Hoffman telling his story, about seeing he was on the overpass at Stemmons Freeway and he sees the gunman behind the picket fence atop the grassy knoll back in the parking lot. These people, what they didn't realize, and same thing with Gordon Arnold, who appeared in The Men Who Killed Kennedy. He says that, he said the assassin fired from the picket fence right over his shoulder when he was standing at the top of the slope by the fence. All of these people didn't realize in 1988 for The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and also earlier when they were telling their tales, and the early 90s with Beverly Oliver, they didn't realize the thing was going to come along called the internet.
No.
So their lies can very easily be checked on by the entire world now, but they didn't know that back in 1987, 88, 89, 90, and so on.
So what about Jack Davis?
You talking about like inside the theater?
Yeah, so Oswald came in there. Anyway, early. Put him in there around the same time or whatever, and got up and moved around, sitting from person to person. What about his story?
So that has to first of all, to believe that story, you're going to have to believe that the best system that Oswald and his handler could come up with was just sit down next to a guy and see if that's him or not. See if that's who you're supposed to be meeting, and if he doesn't look at you and start talking to you, then just get up and walk over to the next guy and sit down beside him. Eventually, one of these guys is going to be your handler. So to believe the story, you're going to have to accept that that's the procedure that these guys were going to choose to go through to get in contact with each other. Does that make sense to you?
That's pretty. No, that doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. That's not what you would do. That's not what you
how to explain it. That just no, that looks like you'd have a more precise communication.
Right.
They're sitting beside strangers. Hey, man, am I supposed to meet you here?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I don't buy that Oswald was going. I mean, that's to me, that's just asinine, and it's not even worth discussing. It's so far out there, it's not even worth discussing, because it's the same thing about, and we're getting away from the Tippit case here, but it's the same thing about Roger Craig when he claimed that he heard a whistle when he was, the Dealey Plaza aftermath, and he's on that grass infield, I think it was, between Elm Street and Maine, and they're looking for missing bullets and so on, and he hears a whistle, looks up, and there's a Rambler station wagon coming down Elm, and a man who he claimed was Oswald comes running down this is 10 minutes after the assassination, by the way. This is 12:40. So, because there's a photo by Jim Murray that catches the Rambler station wagon, and the clock atop the depository says 12:40. And Roger Craig says that basically that Rambler station wagon that's seen in that photo, you hear a whistle, and Craig looked up and sees the man who he says is Oswald come running down the grassy slope, gets in the Rambler, and Craig said he tried to make his way over to him, but there's too many people and he couldn't get to him, and the car disappeared underneath the triple underpass. So to believe, now, did somebody come down a hill and get in a car and drive away? Probably, because other people saw the same event, but nobody said it was Oswald except for Roger Craig. So to accept the idea, to accept what Roger Craig is saying, you're going to have to accept that the best these conspirators could come up with is, hey, assassinate the president, and in 10 minutes, we're going to whistle for you, and you come down the hill right there on Elm Street, hop on in the car, and we'll drive away. Don't go out the back door, in secret. Don't do anything like that. Just come right out. We're going to whistle, and you come right down the hill and hop in, and right in front of God and everybody. It's the same thing with Jack Davis. Oswald going seat to seat looking for his supposed handler. It doesn't make sense. It's not what they would have done.
Oh, and Bernard Hare. What about his?
Well,
story?
here's the thing with Bernard Hare, and this is just my opinion. So anybody listening out there, go easy on me. This is just my opinion. So Johnny Brewer, when he went inside the shoe store after asking Julia Postal if she sold a ticket to the guy, and she said no, he goes inside the theater, and Butch Burroughs is the first person he sees. I think Johnny Brewer even called him the manager. But so he recruits Butch Burroughs to help him look for this guy. So Johnny Brewer, while they tell Julia Postal to go ahead and call the police, Johnny Brewer and Butch Burroughs are now checking the balcony and the main seating area, looking for this guy. And Brewer sees the guy, goes down to the screen, goes down to the doors behind the screen, the exit doors for people that want to exit into the alley behind the theater after the movie's over. And he's back there and he's watching the guy from behind the screen, basically. And all of a sudden he hears like a little tug on the door. Well, obviously the police couldn't get in because the door was locked from the outside. So Johnny Brewer opens the door to let the police officers in. That's what his goal was. They immediately apprehend him, and Johnny Brewer testifies to this. So they grab him right away, throw him up against the wall, basically like, "Hey, who are you and what are you doing back here? We're looking for a cop killer. Who are you and what are you doing back here?" And Johnny Brewer told him, they pulled him outside actually into the alley and did that to him. And Johnny Brewer told him, hey, I'm the one that called you guys, the man you want's inside. So I'm only speculating here, and I could be way off on this, but it's my opinion that Bernard Hare, he makes the claim that the gunman or that Oswald was carried out the back of the theater and taken away in a police car in the alley behind the theater. Well, we all know that the real Oswald was taken out the front of the theater because it's captured in plenty of photos and also film footage. So Bernard Hare claims that for years he had always believed that he witnessed Oswald being arrested until one day he finds out that Oswald was taken out the front. Then he thinks to himself, well, then who the hell did I see that was taken out the back?
Okay.
So it's my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, that Bernard Hare saw Johnny Brewer being manhandled by the police and might have made the assumption that that was Oswald's arrest. You see what I'm saying?
You're talking about minutes, yeah. I guess, from the time Brewer seemed to get the police in there and they arrested him.
Exactly.
You're talking about 2 minutes.
Brewer opened the door when he heard the noise. He opened the back door to let the police in, and they grabbed him, pulled him out into the alley, and were about ready to arrest him on the spot until he told them, hey, I'm the guy. I called you guys, the guy you want's inside there, and I'll point him out to you, that kind of thing. So, I'm just speculating that that's what Bernard Hare saw.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense then, because you're talking about, 2-3 minutes from the time that they apprehended him, or
exactly, right? Because it didn't take long. Once the officers go inside, Nick McDonald starts walking up the aisle. He's questioning a few people along the way. He knows damn good and well that the man he wants is sitting in the third row from the back, but to throw him off a little bit, he gives this man a false sense of security. And as he's making his way up the aisle, he decides to stop a couple of other people and ask them for their ID, and they sit back down. He stops another person, asks them for their ID. So the whole time in my opinion, he's giving Oswald the hope that they're not there looking for Oswald.
Okay, yeah.
Because if they would have walked straight to Oswald from the movie screen, straight to Oswald, who was sitting at the back of the theater, Oswald's going to pull his gun on him before they get close to him. But if they give him the false sense of security that they're not necessarily looking for him, maybe they can get close enough to him before he pulls his gun, which is exactly what happened. In my opinion, Nick McDonald played that to perfection.
I agree with you totally. That's because you're right. They were pulling the weapon on him.
So back to the back. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Just something else.
No. I've got something I want to ask you later. But no big deal. I'll say people out there. And what was the first thing Oswald said when they got him in the police car about frying for?
Yeah. So well, what happens is Oswald is in the car. Gerald Hill's in the front seat. Oswald's in the back seat with Detective Paul Bentley, and there was another officer on the other side. Oswald was in the middle, and Bentley reaches in Oswald's back pocket, pulls out his wallet, hands it to Gerald Hill, and basically they start talking to Oswald, and they mention about killing a cop, and Oswald makes the comment, "Oh, did a cop get killed?" Like he's playing dumb, and Oswald said something like, "Well, I heard you fry for that." And one of the officers said back to him, "Well, maybe you'll find out," that kind of thing. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oswald said something like, "It only takes a second," or.
Yeah, it only takes a second to die. Yeah, that's what he said. Well, they say it only takes a second to die. I should tell you something else here. Jim Lavelle, everybody knows that Jim Lavelle was handcuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald when Oswald was shot and killed in the Dallas police basement by Jack Ruby on Sunday, November 24th, right?
Right.
But Lavelle was in the elevator coming from what I believe was the third floor, making their way to the basement. And Oswald and Lavelle are in the elevator, and Lavelle says, everybody knows the story. Lavelle says, Lee, if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you. And Lavelle said that Oswald kind of smiled and said, oh, nobody's going to shoot at me. You're just being dramatic. Well, here's the thing. I met Jim Lavelle in person with two other guys from our Facebook group, JFK Truth Be Told. One was Frank Battleson, the other was Dave Ledbetter. The three of us were lucky enough to spend 6 hours with Jim Lavelle in his living room back in July of 2019, which was about a month and a half before he passed away. And one of the things that he told us when we were sitting right there in his living room, and he was telling us for 6 hours, we talked about the Kennedy assassination for an hour. We spent the next 5 hours talking about other police stories. He just loved to talk. He enjoyed the attention, and he enjoyed the company. We were, believe me, we weren't keeping him up. we got there at 6 p.m., left at midnight, and we actually said, well, we probably should go, because he was still ready to keep telling stories. Such a nice guy. But one of the things that he
sharp then.
What's that?
Yeah, I said he was still that sharp then, because he was almost 100, right?
Yeah. Now you could see he was starting to slip a little bit with some things. Like he was trying to tell us one story and he couldn't think of the word Florida. So he actually held his hands up like a map of the U.S. and he held his hand like in the bottom right corner. And he said, what state is that down there? You could tell that he was starting to have issues, but for the most part, he was still sharp as a whip as far as his memory of the events. That was pretty impressive. But
he was
one of
99.
the things. What's that?
Wasn't he like 99 when he died? He was close to 100.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep. So one of the things that I took away from that, something he said to me, which I'll never forget, when I was sitting right there in his living room, was he said that when he was in the elevator with Oswald, and he said, Lee, if somebody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you, meaning that they'll hit Oswald and not Lavelle, who's going to be handcuffed to him. Okay. And Lavelle said that he paid him this compliment on purpose. He did it for a reason. He wasn't just trying to chum up and be buddies with Oswald. He had a reason for making the statement. And that is he wanted to see Oswald's reaction. And when Oswald reacted with a smile and said, oh, nobody's going to shoot at me, you're just being dramatic. If you did not shoot the president and did not shoot a police officer, and a police officer says to you, if somebody shoots at us today, I hope they're as good a shot as you are, your response is going to be, well, I didn't shoot anybody.
Yeah, you're not going to smile.
But instead, and this is Lavelle's point, Oswald took the compliment. He received the compliment and accepted it. So Jim Lavelle was smarter than Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, that was
Oswald got complimented, and he accepted the compliment. In other words,
yeah, I see exactly. Well, that I mean, what am I? Sense of pride or?
Yeah, exactly, right.
Acceptance, I guess, would be a good word too, or used for that. Because you said accepted the compliment, and smiled over it.
Yeah, he accepted the compliment. He received it. He received the compliment and smiled for it. He didn't. If it were me, and I know damn good and well, I didn't shoot the president of the United States or shoot a police officer, and Jim Lavelle says, Bill, if someone shoots at us today, since I'm going to be standing 1 foot from you, I hope they're as good a shot as you. If I did not shoot Kennedy and Tippit, I'm going to say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't shoot anybody. In other words, I'm not that good of a shot. I didn't do it. But instead, Oswald smiled and said, oh, nobody's going to shoot at me. You're just being dramatic. Oswald accepted the compliment, in other words.
Yeah.
So back a couple things here. Back to the Tippit case. So the bottom line is something that no conspiracy theorist has ever been able to explain to me is what happened to the jacket Oswald was wearing when he left the rooming house, between the rooming house and then he's seen at the theater with no jacket. So what would have happened to it? Okay. By the way, Marina Oswald, she told the FBI that Lee did own a light gray jacket. And when she was shown Commission Exhibit 162, which is the jacket that was found underneath the car in the Texaco lot, she was shown that during her Warren Commission testimony, and she said that was Lee's jacket. So,
okay. Well, let's see.
Nobody can explain to me, and I'm still waiting for a logical explanation of what happened to the jacket that Oswald was wearing when he left the rooming house. because all of the witnesses, despite what color they said it was, they still said he was wearing a jacket. Another thing regarding Akila Clemens that I forgot to mention earlier, and this just occurred to me. You mentioned Akila Clemens saying that she saw two men. Didn't you mention that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have Jimmy Burt and Bill Smith. They're 2/3 of a block east of the shooting scene.
Yeah.
You have Domingo Benavides, who was 15 to 20 feet away from the shooting scene. And when I say the shooting scene, I'm talking about the patrol car.
Right.
You have Helen Markham, who watched the entire thing go down beginning to end. We already discussed that. You have William Scoggins, who saw the police car pull over. He saw the man walking away from Scoggins' position. In other words, the opposite direction that Jimmy Burt saw the guy walking. And he saw Tippett begin to get out of the car before hearing the shots and falling down. And these are the people that were out on the street and saw pretty much the events unfold. And every one of them, Jimmy Burt, Bill Smith, Domingo Benavides, Helen Markham, William Scoggins, none of them say there were two men. Every one of them, just whether they said the guy weighed 140 pounds or the guy weighed 240 pounds, which they didn't, it was still just one man. So how did, if there were two men, like a lot of conspiracy theorists like to attribute to Akila Clemens, even though quite honestly, I'm not even sure Akila Clemens is claiming there were two killers. But how did these real witnesses, Burt, Smith, Benavides, Scoggins, Markham, how did they manage to miss seeing a second man when they pretty much watched the entire thing go down? So anybody who wants to believe that there were two men that Tippett encountered, they're ignoring the very obvious issue that the witnesses who watched it unfold all said that Tippett was talking to just one man.
That's a good point.
I think we pretty much covered, unless you have any other questions.
No, I mean, I think that's pretty much done it. I mean, I did have one other question. For 1 second, I want you to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
What evidence would you attack against him if you were on his defense team or helping out? I mean, what would you go after? The ballistics, the witness testimony? I mean, is there anything that you would attack?
Okay. If I were an Oswald defense attorney, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Geez. Well, first of all, the physical evidence incriminates Oswald.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The eyewitness identifications incriminate Oswald. But one thing I would attack, and I really wasn't prepared to do this, but since you're asking me, I guess I would attack the validity of the lineups, because Ted Callaway and Sam Ginyard, now these are the two guys that worked at the Deutsch Motor Company halfway down Patton. They saw the killer running down the street with a gun in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
They both they both went to a lineup Friday night, and they both identified Oswald as the man they saw running with a gun in his hand at the lineup.
Uh-huh.
Problem is, they attended the lineup together. They were standing right beside each other when they went to the lineup. Every witness should attend a lineup on their own. That should be the only witness in there making identification, because otherwise you'll have one witness sway an identification of another witness. Okay. And it wasn't just Ted Callaway and Sam Ginyard. It was also Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis. They attended the lineup together as well. Okay. And I don't think that should have happened. I think the Dallas Police Department kind of messed up with the lineups. And I'm not 100% sure that those positive identifications in the police lineups would have been admitted had there been a trial. But I talked to a district attorney of Red River County, Texas. He's a client of mine. And which, by the way, Red River County, Texas is where Jd Tippett and Jim Lavelle were both born.
Oh, I didn't know that.
By pure coincidence, I talked to the district attorney in Red River County, and I asked him this question. I set up the scenario, and he said, yeah, witnesses are not supposed to attend lineups together. He says, as a matter of fact, the trial judge probably would not have allowed that. He says, but that doesn't mean that during the trial, the prosecution could have put Barbara Davis up on the stand and asked her, the man you saw cutting across the yard with a gun, is he in the courtroom today? And they if she identified him in the lineup, she probably would have also pointed to him in the courtroom. So what this guy told me, the district attorney for the Red River County, Texas, he told me that the trial judge would have had to made a decision whether he's going to allow an in-court identification or not. And he said, I can think of no reason why he wouldn't have allowed it.
So they could throw out the lineups and then call them to the stand.
Yeah,
And
just
still
throw
identify
out the lineups and call him to the stand instead.
Another brother. Well, I guess we've all seen the clip with him and the Latino kids where he's complaining.
Yeah. Now, what that lineup is, so there's black and white film footage of Oswald being led to a lineup on Saturday afternoon. Now, this is the lineup that was attended by the two cab drivers, William Scoggins, who was at the Tippit scene, and William Whaley, who took him from the Greyhound station to Beckley, to the rooming house. They attended a lineup, and that footage you're talking about is Oswald as he's being led to the
So
lineup.
like you put me in a t-shirt that way I'd be picked out.
Yeah, exactly. So Oswald was bitching, and to be honest with you, he probably had justification in the point that he was trying to make. Because if you look at the other fellows in the lineup, they weren't wearing a plain white T-shirt.
They looked about 10 years younger than him too.
Yeah, well, Oswald was only 23 or 20. What was he? 24 at the time. So they couldn't have been 10 years younger than him, really. Unless they're 15.
One of them, I mean, they just looked really. I mean, he looked like he looked really young, but yeah.
Well, here's something else too, and I keep referencing Dale Myers and With Malice. If anybody out there listening to this really wants to learn about the Tippit case, the murder of police officer Jd Tippett by Lee Harvey Oswald, there's a book called With Malice. It's written by Dale Myers. It's called With Malice, Lee Harvey Oswald and the Murder of Officer Jd Tippett. It's written by Dale Myers, and I highly recommend that you read this book cover to cover. It's the best book, in my opinion, along with The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop. It's the best book on the Kennedy assassination, even though it's about the Tippit case. But let's be honest, it's basically a Kennedy assassination book. Wow. And Myers evaluates the evidence fairly. He actually went to the National Archives. He's interviewed the witnesses. He spent a number of years, and I mean decades actually, researching for the book. Now, he actually wasn't doing the research for the book for a lot of it. He was just into the case. And then after doing 20, 25 years of research, he realized, hey, I might have a book here. So that's what he did. I highly recommend the book. But basically in the book, he's talking to William Scoggins, who was the cab driver that was sitting at the corner of 10th and Patton and pretty much saw the shooting. He saw Oswald running his way, said, poor damn cop or poor dumb cop. And what William Scoggins, I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. Dale Myers was not talking to William Scoggins. Dale Myers was talking to Jim Lavelle. And what Jim Lavelle told Dale Myers was that during the lineups, William Scoggins said to Jim Lavelle, well, he can bitch and moan all he wants, but that's the man I saw running from the scene. So point being, Oswald, maybe it may have even been purposely trying to sabotage his own lineup to try to get thrown out. But it didn't matter to William Scoggins and probably to the other witnesses too, because regardless of how he was acting, he was still the man they saw no matter what. So I want to be clear on how I said this. So basically, William Scoggins said to Jim Lavelle at the lineup, when Oswald was carrying on, complaining about how he's only in a T-shirt and he's got a bruise on his forehead and he doesn't look like the other men in the lineup. Well, William Scoggins said to Lavelle, he can bitch and holler all he wants, but that's the man I saw running from the scene. And then when Dale Myers was writing his book, interviewing Jim Lavelle told that story to Dale Myers, and Myers put that in his book. I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, I think that's a good story. The thing that got me at first interested in this, and I fell into the trap, because I mean, I was like everybody else. I never really this was always this afterthought. I never really paid any attention to the Tippit murder. Right. As I listened to Joseph McBride on YouTube. Man, and I didn't know anything about it. Man, I was sold. I mean, and then I was like, oh God, I was like, I can't.
Well, just so you know, now Joseph McBride did do some of his own interviews, but he also basically stole a lot from With Malice and just put it in his book. Just so you know.
Yeah, I've seen the interview or the back and forth between him and Dale Myers. The thing. So, when's your book coming out, Bill?
It's I could write a book about the Tippit case, and it would take me a couple of years to do it, but it's already been done. I couldn't do any better than with Malice. And again, I'm just, anybody out there that wants to learn about the murder of Jd Tippett, just go get With Malice. Make sure you read it. Read it unbiased. Throw your conspiracy notions out the window. If you're a lone nutter, which means you believe Oswald alone killed Kennedy, throw that out the window. Just read the book. Take your time, read it cover to cover, and you'll see that Oswald is definitely guilty. And this is what we said at the very beginning when you asked me if I thought Oswald killed Tippit. I think it's a fact that Oswald murdered Jd Tippett. I think the War Commission proved it, and I think Dale Myers proves it in his book.
Would you say that there's more evidence that he killed Tippit than Kennedy?
Yes.
The evidence
Yes. Yes. I'll even say that there's I'm 99% sure that Lee Harvey Oswald alone assassinated President Kennedy. And I'm not going to say 100% because I want to leave that 1% open because nobody knows really what was going on in that sixth floor window. And just because Oswald's rifle was found up on the sixth floor, and make no bones about it, Oswald's rifle, the one he ordered, was indeed found up on the sixth floor. Some people like to claim it wasn't, or there's no proof that Oswald ordered that rifle and so on. That's not true. He did. But so even though his rifle was found on the sixth floor and he left the scene, he left work for some crazy reason, he has no alibi. A guy who had tried to defect to Russia, you're telling me he's not going to go see the President of the United States pass by? Oswald, if he's not assassinating Kennedy, he's going to be out on the front steps with everybody else watching.
I got politics. I mean, I've read, he loved current events, and I mean,
if you're Oswald and you're political, like Oswald obviously was, you are most definitely going to be out front watching the President of the United States pass by versus sitting in a lunchroom eating your lunch on the second floor. Mm-hmm. There's no way that's what he's going to choose to be doing. So Oswald had no alibi. Buell Frazier, Billy Lovelady, all the others that were out on the landing, and not to mention the hundreds of people that were in Dealey Plaza throughout watching the motorcade go by. And the one that was probably more politically in tuned than any of them was Oswald. And he's not out there watching the motorcade go by. And there's not one person that ever said, oh, Oswald couldn't assassinate the president. He was standing beside me when the motorcade went by. Nobody says that. He's got no alibi.
Good point.
He would have been out front if he wasn't up on the sixth floor. So in answer to your question, though, I leave that 1% open because we don't really know what happened up on the sixth floor. But when it comes to the murder of Jd Tippett, we do know because all of these people tell us so. So does the evidence. The shells at the scene matched the revolver taken from him. The witness identification, the positive witness identification, the nobody saying it wasn't Oswald. So I believe it's a fact that Oswald alone killed Tippett, and I'm 99% sure that Oswald alone killed Kennedy. And the only reason why I say 99 is because I don't think it's right to say any of us to say we're 100% sure.
Thanks for the answer. I mean, it's been a lot of information here.
You're going to get me in trouble with some low nutters though for saying things like that.
Well, but I could, I didn't pin you down too hard on it.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But no, it's been a fun.
If anybody's out there listening, I'm on Facebook, Bill Brown. My main picture on Facebook is a picture. It's a split picture of Lee Oswald and John Kennedy. And if anybody out there listening wants to get a hold of me on Facebook and tell me what happened to the jacket Oswald was wearing that he left the rooming house in, if he didn't shoot Jd Tippett at 10th and Patton and then ditch the jacket to change his appearance, which is exactly what he did. But if you don't think he did, then just explain to me why he got rid of the jacket between the rooming house and the Hardy shoe store on Jefferson. Because I'm still waiting for a good explanation for that, and nobody's ever been able to give me a good explanation.
Yeah, I want to hear it too, because I can't think of it. I'm at a loss. I don't even know.
There's no reasonable explanation for why Oswald got rid of his jacket between the rooming house and the shoe store, other than to change his appearance because he just shot a police officer. And he got rid of that jacket quick. The Texas Theater was about 7 blocks from 10th and Patton.
Mm-hmm.
He got rid of that jacket in that very first block after leaving 10th and Patton. It ain't like he wore that jacket halfway to the theater and then he got rid of it quickly. That's what I would have done too.
Yeah. And somehow I thought that the theater was even closer than that. Than
Yeah, it's about 7 blocks. I'm just kind of going by memory here. It's about 7 blocks. And Oswald ditched the jacket 1 block away from the shooting scene. Maybe a block and a half at the most, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I appreciate your time, man. I think that's all the questions I had. I mean, unless you had any other statements you want to make about it.
No, I just want to just kind of maybe make a summation here real quick.
Okay.
So you have 10 witnesses positively identified Lee Harvey Oswald, either shooting a police officer or running from the scene with a gun in his hand, or in Mary Brock's case, disappearing behind the Texaco station, and he had a jacket on when she saw him. Okay, so you have those people identified Oswald as that man. You have the shells found at the scene that were ballistically linked to the revolver taken from Oswald when he was arrested at the Texas Theater, to the exclusion of every other weapon in the world. Okay. You had the same mix and match of brands that killed Tippit, the same mix and match of brands Oswald had in his possession, and that can't be just a coincidence. If that's a coincidence, the conspirators got really lucky that their patsy, their chosen patsy, happened to have the same brand of ammunition on his person, whether it be in the revolver or in his pants pocket, as the same 2 brands of ammunition that killed the police officer at 10th and Patton.
You know, sorry to interrupt you right there. I was talking to somebody one night. Well, I was at a friend's house, I believe. He said something about a weapon to use, and I said, "Well, here, I had a 38 that was on my hip," and I said, "Well, here, man, I unloaded or opened it up and took the cartridges out and handed it to him. I said, this is, the best one I think you should get, slide, blah, blah." So I was just kind of looking at the bullets, and I had 3 38 Special Winchesters and 2 Remingtons in there. And
Did you really?
Yes. And I thought, I'll be damned. I've got 2 different types of ammunition in here. I said,
that's funny.
Because somebody was arguing that, well, the conspirators, I was like, well, hell, here, I've got it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it.
Yeah, exactly. And keep in mind, again, and this is key. I know I already said this, but just to sum it up, though, the revolver originally was, designed to fire the 38, and it was rechambered to fire the 38 Special. Now, the 38 Special is a smaller bullet, and because of that, because the 38 Special was smaller in diameter, it's harder it has less chances of getting scratches and markings on the shell that match up with the inside of the barrel, because the bullet was smaller and it weebled and wobbled through the barrel, if you follow me. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that actually affected some of the identifications of the bullet itself, not the shell, but the bullet itself, being able to be linked to the revolver. That created a problem because the bullets were smaller in diameter than the original 38. And remember that I told you that bullets from Tippit's body, they had signs of gas erosion. And again, that's caused when a propellant escapes between the surface of the bullet and the inside of the barrel. So a larger bullet, a 38, would have been a larger diameter, would not have allowed that gas erosion, because there would have been no pocket for this propellant to escape. But because the 38 Special is smaller in diameter, it had it gave this propellant the ability to escape between the surface of the bullet and the inside of the barrel. And then the bullets removed from Tippit's body showed signs of that exact erosion, that gas erosion. So in other words, the experts that tried to ballistically link the bullets that killed Tippit to the revolver had a problem, because the bullets were smaller and the gun had been rechambered to fire the 38 Special, but the barrel was still larger, which in other words was meant for the 38. And that made ballistic testing on the bullets a little harder to do. But Joseph Nickel, though, one of the 4 experts, according to him, he was able to link one of the bullets to the revolver to the exclusion of any other weapon in the world. But the other experts, he's the only one that did. So you have to take his findings with a grain of salt, because the other ones couldn't do the same. But as far as the shells go, all 4 shells found at the scene were indeed linked by all 4 of these experts. All 4 shells were linked to the revolver taken from Oswald, to the exclusion of any other weapon in the world. So bottom line is, Oswald was holding the gun in his hands when he was in the scuffle with the Texas Theater, that fired off the shells that were found at the scene. So
Okay. That links. Yeah.
that's pretty much it. So bottom line is it is a fact that Oswald murdered Jd Tippett. This is a fact.
I agree with you. After a couple of years came to or I forgot that I believe that he killed Tippett along.
Yeah. I have a big smile on my face right now, Chris.
Well, I'm almost, I do believe he's almost there to the no conspiracy on the Kennedy side, but it's a process. Yeah, I believe he's the lone gunman now, which that was
Sure.
Yeah, some of the stuff I can't believe I believed for all those years, but I guess like what you said, the human mind wants craves the mystery and then the suspense.
There's the truth.
Yeah.
As far as go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's just too boring. I mean,
Yeah, man in building shoots man in car.
Yeah, that some little communist, wannabe that got off a lucky shot, and I think was it Dan Rather that says when you put Kennedy up here, and the people.
That was William Manchester. William Manchester wrote a book called The Death of a President.
Yeah.
And he was interviewed for a newspaper, if I'm recalling this correctly. He was interviewed for a newspaper, and in that newspaper interview, that's when he makes the comment about, people have a hard time, and I'm ad-libbing. I'm not going to look up the exact comment, but people have a hard time equating a lone nut killing the most powerful man in the country. It doesn't, like the perfect crime. So if you take the Third Reich, the murder of all the Jews, the Nazis murdering the Jews. So you take a scale, and you have one end of the scale, you have the other end of the scale, and you have 6 million murdered Jews on one end of the scale, and on the other end of the scale, you have the Third Reich and the Nazi regime. Well, these two things equal each other. They're the same weight, so the scale stays level.
Right.
But when you take the most powerful man in the world and you put him on one end of the scale, and you take this wretched waif Oswald, and that's what William Manchester called him, a wretched waif. He says, when you take this wretched waif Oswald and you put him on the other scale, it doesn't balance. And so therefore people have a hard time accepting, with the Nazis and the Jews, you have the greatest crime equaling the greatest criminals.
Right.
But with Kennedy on one scale, Oswald on the other, it doesn't balance. And therefore there's no way it could be. It is basically what William Manchester is saying regarding the conspiracy mind when it comes to the Kennedy assassination. Now that William Manchester is not saying he believes in a conspiracy. He's trying to explain the reasoning behind a lot of people believing there was a conspiracy, in other words. But that was William Manchester.
It equates.
Exactly. Yeah. The Kennedy assassination with Oswald doesn't equate. That's the problem.
Right.
That's why that's hard time accepting it.
That's what I meant to put it. I phrased it wrong.
Yeah. Now the Nazis and the Third Reich, it does equate to 6 million murdered Jews, but the Kennedy assassination doesn't. That was William Manchester's point. And that's also a pretty good book too. It's called The Death of a President by William Manchester. I recommend it.
I don't. When did he? I'm not familiar with that one. I guess there's probably thousands out there now on the.
In my opinion, the best book to read about the assassination itself is called The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop. That's in my opinion, that's a beginner. And if people that are not familiar with the story at all, but kind of want to read about it, start with The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop. It's a great book.
Yeah, I would recommend that anybody start the novices. Stay away from the conspiracy stuff at first because it'll trap.
And speaking of which, I've never even read Into the Nightmare by Joseph McBride. Why would I even want to waste my time? Because I already know the evidence. I know the evidence. I know the eyewitness testimony. And oh, by the way, I know the evidence. Why do I want to waste my time reading Into the Nightmare just so I can hear the spin that he puts on it?
Well, when I got through listening to it, and I listened to him about 3 or 4 times, and then I got through it. When I first started having doubts about his story, at first I was just enthralled with it. Is what you said, is then I got thinking, I was like, well, hell, why didn't any other witnesses see all these other cops on scene shooting Tippett?
Yeah.
But he's claiming, 2 cop cars are there and 2 different police officers are shooting him. And I was like, well, what? Nobody else seen the cop. Nobody else seen the cop there.
How, if I ever was able to talk to him, I simply, with respect, would ask him, how did Helen Markham and Domingo Benavides and William Scoggins manage to miss seeing all this going on? What does he have to say about those 3 witnesses who literally, and Chris, you've been there with me at 10th and Patton. You know where William Scoggins' cab was sitting.
Mm-hmm.
You know where Domingo Benavides pulled over his pickup truck, and you know where Helen Markham was standing. How would they have missed any of these things that Joseph McBride tries to say happened?
Oh, they couldn't have. I mean, it's impossible.
Well, they couldn't have missed it. No way.
He claims that the cars, one of the police cars is already parked in the driveway when Tippit pulls up. And there's just no way.
No, it's not true at all. Not true. And but if you're trying to sell a book, I guess you got to make it nice and juicy.
Well, I mean, and I think that's part of it too. I mean, people are gonna look like I said, the suspense and mystery is a lot more entertaining than the truth.
Right. Exactly. For the most part. However, the book that tells the truth in an unbiased manner is With Malice by Dale Myers, and I love that book. And I highly recommend it. I know I've said it 3 or 4 times now, but man, if you're interested in the Tippit case, that's the book you got to go get. You have to read it. And anybody who reads that with an open mind, anybody who has a reasonable mind is going to conclude once they've read it that Oswald alone murdered Jd Tippett. It doesn't mean you have to believe there was no conspiracy to assassinate the president, but Oswald alone did murder Jd Tippett. And then if he did murder Jd Tippett, why did he do it? If he hadn't shot the president, why did he kill Tippett?
I don't know if I've ever told you this, or I may have just forgot. Back before he blocked me, I asked Joseph McBride to debate you on the Tippett murder case, and he politely declined.
Yeah, I would. I welcome it. Fine with me. Yeah.
No, he declined, and I said, well, it'll be.
If he should ever hear this, he's absolutely welcome to do it. I welcome him. I wouldn't be rude. Anybody that listened to my debate, I did a Tippit debate with another Facebook member last summer, and anybody who would listen to it can see that I was being very polite through the whole thing. I don't want to be rude and yell and scream at anybody. And so, Joseph McBride, if you happen to be hearing this at any point and you want to defend your book, then, let's do it. I don't expect it to happen. I don't expect it to happen. I've already had 2 other people tell me that they've asked him to debate me and he wouldn't do it. And I don't know if it's because he just doesn't want to waste his time with it, or he feels like he's got nothing to gain but something to lose. So therefore, why do it? Yeah. I
mean, you got a book out there and you've put all this into it. You've got a lot to, lose there. But I told him, I said, it's not gonna be slanted to him. I said, it'll be fair. I said, and he politely declined. And I said, okay, thank you, Mr. McBride. And, Bill, man, thanks. I appreciate this.
I appreciate it, Chris. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. I can talk about the Tippit case for hours upon hours. No problem.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. Listen to it and get this edited and loaded up. And I'm going to start a podcast too, man, and see if I can get how far I can get that thing going. I ain't got nothing to do, but
yeah. Okay, well, I appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks a lot, bud.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye.